adventures, starting with American TV series. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 226, Furin's Late Night Visit. After defeating Voldemort, all that remained was the lacquer of diadem. As Locke had said, obtaining it was a piece of cake. The minor inconvenience caused by the public execution was not a big deal for Locke and Dumbledore. Before long, nearly everyone in the wizarding world knew that Voldemort was dead, his era completely over. Then there was Snape. Dumbledore intervened on his behalf, consigning him to a minor warning, claiming he had only dealt with an unforgivable Death Eater. Many wizards breathed a sigh of relief, even celebrating in various ways. Many wizards had been persecuted by Voldemort and the Death Eaters over the years. However, some also began to fear and dread Locke, who had played a crucial role in the entire process and had even captured Voldemort himself. Some even suspected that he might inherit everything Voldemort had and rule the wizarding world through violence. Locke had anticipated this, and it had no effect on him. It even made his shopping easier than usual. So he didn't address the rumors that were spreading. Instead, Hermione couldn't help but feel a surge of indignation at the malicious incitement and speculation in the newspapers. Don't worry about it. There are only a few people in the entire British wizarding world. I don't even want to be the village chief, Locke said casually. There was a much wider world to explore. It was really boring to dominate a small place. PFFT, Locke's words made Hermione burst out laughing. Well, there's no need to worry about these comments. These reports are either driven by people who want to cause chaos or Death Eaters who haven't been dealt with yet. They won't cause any big trouble. I can deal with them in a few days. Hermione didn't find Locke's words wrong. In her eyes, Locke was now almost omnipotent. Next, Locke planned to visit the hidden Death Eaters one by one. In fact, at the venue of the third match, he had not mentioned one thing: Voldemort's Horcrux, the Gaunt Ring. Voldemort created 7 Horcruxes, believing 7 to be a magical number. The remaining soul in Harry was merely an accident, something Voldemort himself hadn't anticipated. The Gaunt Ring was a family heirloom of the Gaunt family, descendants of Slytherin. The Gaunts were actually Voldemort's own family. Tom, then a 5th-year student, had already successfully created his first Horcrux, a diary. During a visit to his mother's home, his uncle revealed that his father was a Muggle and had abandoned them. Twisted from childhood, Voldemort sought revenge, killing his father's family with the Avada Kedavra curse and then altering his uncle's memories to make him a scapegoat. He then used his father's death to create the Gaunt Ring as a second Horcrux, which he magically hid in the Gaunt mansion. Locke secretly destroyed the ring, gaining access to a vast amount of Voldemort's memories. Besides Voldemort's lifelong magical knowledge and experience, which Locke was most interested in, he also discovered the true identities and secrets of many Death Eaters. Many of these Death Eaters held considerable status and influence within the wizarding world. Lucius Malfoy was just one example. With this leverage, Locke could easily coerce them into doing things like collecting hard-to-obtain magical plants and animals, or handing over their family's hidden magical knowledge. As for whether such coercion would backfire, Locke planned to leave at the end of the semester. He simply needed to ensure these Death Eaters remained obedient for the time being. Before leaving, he could hand the list to Dumbledore, who would then naturally address them. "Teacher, you seem to have been reading alchemy a lot lately." Putting down her newspaper, Hermione quickly noticed the book in Locke's hand. "These are the alchemy notes Nicholas Flamel gave me," Locke stated directly, without hesitation. As the wizarding world's most renowned alchemist, known for his creations of the Philosopher's Stone and the Potion of Immortality, Nicholas Flamel's notes and insights could easily be exchanged for a city. Nicholas Flamel, is this really that person's alchemy notebook? Hermione, of course, knew Nicholas Flamel, and her interest peaked. She had the impression that the time-space converter she had previously applied for was actually Nicholas Flamel's work. "Of course, if you're interested, you can make a copy to study later, but don't try it yourself. Many alchemical processes, like potion making, can be life-threatening if something goes wrong," Locke explained, then looked Hermione over. "Speaking of which, your outfit looks nice today. It suits you very well, really." Hermione's heart brightened. Seeing Locke return his attention to his book, she didn't care. Instead, she took a potion-related book and sat down beside Locke to read. The notebook in Locke's hand didn't look thick, but it contained a lot of content. If it were placed on a regular book, it would fill several bookcases. Locke had just received it from Nicholas Flamel. Knowing that Locke might be leaving soon, and given Locke's already solid foundation in alchemy, Nicholas Flamel had given Locke his notebook. An unknown amount of time passed before Locke received a magical message. He glanced at it and said to Hermione, "I'm going to be out for a bit. Don't forget to eat, okay, teacher?" Hermione knew Locke had been away a lot lately, apparently busy with business matters. In fact, Locke had been on a shopping spree throughout the wizarding world, taking away his harvest every few days. His extravagant spending had even caused the prices of many common magical materials to rise significantly. It could be said that Locke single-handedly caused inflation throughout the wizarding world. When Locke returned to Hogwarts and approached his office door, he noticed a figure standing there. He had a waterfall of silver hair and azure blue eyes that looked at Locke, as if he was about to speak but hesitated. "What can I do for you, Madame Delacour?" Locke said, pushing open the office door. "Come in." It was Fleur Delacour who entered. She followed Locke into the office, took the tea Locke offered, and sipped gently. "Mr. Locke, thank you very much for saving me in the maze earlier. It's my duty." Locke waved his hand. "Protecting the contestants in the maze is my duty. Even so, if it weren't for you, Mr. Locke, I'm afraid I'd still be lying in the infirmary." "You are an honest and kind person." Fleur hesitated, then added, "I just received a message from my father. It seems there's been a small misunderstanding between my family and you, Mr. Locke. It's just a business matter." "Madame Delacour, you're still a student," Locke interrupted. A batch of magical materials he had ordered from the Delacour family some time ago hadn't been delivered on time. He knew the Delacour family had actually sold the materials to someone else who offered a higher price. They were also a very influential family in the wizarding world. Previously, Locke was merely a rising star in the wizarding world. Faced with a lure of profit, the Delacour family chose to offend Locke. Even when the material store demanded on-time delivery, or else they would pay compensation according to the contract, the Delacour family arrogantly refused and even mocked Locke. But after the Triwizard Tournament, the situation changed dramatically. Locke single-handedly defeated Voldemort and utterly killed him, instilling a deep fear in the entire wizarding community. Recently, Locke has been using evidence against many Death Eaters to get favors, including demanding liquidated damages from the Delacour family. When the contract was signed, Locke had set a very high penalty. If it were enforced, the Delacour family would be in tatters. Seeing Fleur Delacour, sent by her family to plead for mercy, he couldn't help but feel a surge of irritation. These people had caused all this trouble, and in the end, a little girl came to him to beg for mercy. Did they think they were being perfunctory? Chapter 227 Cherish the last moment. Since he'd broken the agreement, he had to bear the consequences. This wasn't child's play. Locke felt that the Delacour family's head was truly regressing. "If that's all you have to say, please leave. I'll only discuss this with the head of the Delacour family. You don't need to get involved." After all, the woman was a beauty, and her character was respectable, so Locke didn't say anything harsh. Instead, he spoke a little more forcefully and told her to leave. "I'm sorry, Mr. Locke. I just wanted to thank you. But could you please, just this once, let our family off, Ms. Delacour?" Locke's tone grew stern. "I'll discuss this matter with you once you become the head of the Delacour family. So, please return to your dorms. It's curfew time now." With a gesture of dismissal, Locke ushered the aggrieved Fleur out of the office. While treating a beautiful woman like this was ungentlemanly, Locke wasn't about to let the Delacour family off so easily just because she begged. After opening the door and shooing Fleur out of his office, he noticed a black cat standing outside his room. He wondered if it was a student's pet brought to school. Most Hogwarts students brought their favorite pets to school, with owls being the most common, and cats also making a frequent appearance. Locke crouched down to observe and noticed the black cat wasn't afraid of him. It even meowed softly as he approached. "Sure enough, a clever kitty," Locke said with a smile, lifting the cat up. It was a female, but the gesture seemed to have provoked it, causing it to struggle violently. Locke put it down and returned to his office. Hogwarts students' pets often had magical lineage and were quite intelligent, likely finding their own owners. Unexpectedly, as Locke entered the office, the black cat followed him in, leaping over the chair onto his desk, its eyes fixed on Locke. "Something feels off about this pet cat." Locke frowned slightly, but didn't immediately chase the cat out. He simply said, "You can stay here for a while, But don't run around, scream, or urinate or defecate anywhere." With that, Locke conjured a cushion and placed some dried fish in front of the cat. But since it seemed full, the fish held little appeal. Locke then seemed to ignore the cat and began reading a book. He was actually observing the cat, and noticed it sprawled out on the cushion, seemingly asleep. Am I being overly sensitive? Locke wondered, observing the cat's behavior. He checked the time, cast a few surveillance spells, packed up his office, and went to sleep in a separate break room. The next morning, the black cat, still dreaming, was suddenly picked up by Locke and carried out of the office. "I'm leaving now." "Go back to your owner," Locke said, placing the cat on the ground in front of the office door and leaving. Locke discovered that the black cat, perhaps feeling comfortable in the office, had been coming here for the next few nights, seemingly treating it like its own nest. Locke was suspicious, but he didn't chase it away. After all, there wasn't anything special in the office, it was just some magic books he usually read. He didn't keep any truly rare and precious books in his office, instead storing them in the dimensional space. He'd keep the black cat here to see if there was truly someone behind it. "Ms. Delacour, I've made it clear before. You really don't need to come again. It would be better to have someone from your family come." That evening, Locke was in the office again when he saw Fleur, who had come to visit. Fleur was actually quite embarrassed. She had been filled with gratitude for Locke's rescue and had been looking for an opportunity to thank him, but she suddenly received a message from home asking if he knew Mr. Locke. She casually told her father about Locke's rescue, but to her surprise, her father seemed even more responsive than she was, insisting she visit him to express her gratitude. Fleur had been a bright young woman, otherwise she wouldn't have made it to the Tree Wizard tournament. She sensed something was amiss and began to question her father, only to receive perfunctory responses and refuse to reveal the true cause. It wasn't until she privately questioned her mother that she learned the family was facing bankruptcy. Without Mr. Locke's forgiveness, the penalty for breach of contract could shatter the Delacour family. After much hesitation, Fleur finally approached him, but Locke seemed furious, which only made him even more anxious. If she couldn't secure Locke's forgiveness, the Delacour family would be in grave danger. Fortunately, although Locke looked unhappy this time, he still let her into the office. She cheered herself up in her heart and said, "Mr. Locke, I hope you can let the Delacour family go. Since the contract has been signed, it must be abided by. And as far as I know, the Delacour family didn't really have no goods to hand over to me. They just temporarily gave the goods prepared for me to other people," Locke said slowly. "Maybe the Delacour family thought I was just a small fry, and bullied me. It was no big deal, and they didn't dare to ask you for liquidated damages. It wasn't until I eliminated Voldemort that they hurriedly wanted to beg for mercy, and they asked you, a little girl, to negotiate. Do you think your request is worth 600,000 gold galleons? 600,000, Fiorin couldn't help covering her mouth. She just knew that the liquidated damages were not cheap and might put the family in crisis, but she didn't expect the number to be so large. "And Lady Delacour," Locke said slowly, "if you break the contract and don't receive the punishment you deserve, then who knows? Then, do you think someone will think I'm easy to bully and do the same thing? Then, will I even be able to continue my business? The Delacour family's assets might be much higher than that, but assets are just assets. Liquidated damages require cash. Furthermore, if they were to sell their assets now, those aware of the Delacour family's plight would surely drive down the price, potentially even selling for less than half. Consequently, the Delacour family had no choice but to try to persuade Locke to relent. Furthermore, after learning about Fleur's situation, Locke suspected the Delacour family still harbored some ulterior motive, though the girl before him seemed unaware of her betrayal. At this thought, Locke felt a touch of pity, and his tone softened slightly. "Lady Delacour, this matter is no longer yours to intervene in. Therefore, cherish your last moments at Hogwarts." Chapter 228. It seems to have a smell of XX. Locke's words made Fleur realize they were in the wrong. But considering the family's predicament, she steeled herself and said, "I know it's my father's fault, but Mr. Locke, please." Fleur pursed her lips, a look of pathetic tenderness. Her Vila heritage only made her exude a special charm. Locke, a man of many experiences, still possessed a certain amount of self-control. Though he had lived a simple life in this world for so long, that didn't mean he was a man of beauty traps. "All right," Locke interrupted. "Your best option now is to prepare the liquidated damages before the news spreads. This way, you can retain some of your assets. Otherwise, the longer you delay, the more trouble you'll face. After sending Fleur away again, Locke sighed. He didn't really care about the small amount of money, he was simply annoyed by the Delacour family's attitude, especially now, when a young girl came to him to plead for mercy. It felt so irresponsible. Locke had saved Fleur with some ulterior motives. After all, he was about to return, and Hermione was too young to easily encounter a mythical beast. Fleur, with her Vila heritage, was indeed incredibly charming, far more so than she'd been portrayed in the movies. He certainly wasn't the type of person she deemed unrequited, destined to be a slave in the afterlife. But then this incident happened. If something really happened between him and Fleur, wouldn't it be like he was forcing her? It was truly a hassle. But in life, one must always abide by one's inner rules. While Locke believed he wasn't a good person, he didn't want to slowly become someone without any moral integrity. After seeing Fleur off, Locke didn't lament much and quietly journeyed to the Forbidden Forest. He'd been wandering there for days, his goal being the unicorns. After searching for a while, Locke had found some clues. Following them, he finally spotted unicorns migrating under the cover of centaurs. The centaurs were wary, and crucially, the unicorns seemed to have a special sense of perception. As Locke approached, using an invisibility spell, they suddenly yelped and looked in his direction. "Who's there?" At this moment, the surrounding centaurs, though unaware of Locke, shouted loudly and rushed towards him, some throwing javelins, others shooting arrows, engulfing the area surrounding Locke. Blazing, with a spell, a dozen centaurs erupted in flames. He didn't use divine fire or fiend fire, as that would be too obvious, and the number of wizards who knew divine fire or fiend fire in the wizarding world could be counted. But the flames, deliberately intensified by Locke, quickly spread throughout the centaurs. They screamed in pain and began to writhe on the ground, trying to extinguish the flames. However, due to the spell, unless the flames were extinguished immediately, it would be ineffective. At this moment, one centaur reacted quickly. "There's a river on the road we just passed." Good judgment, but Locke wouldn't give them this opportunity. He quickly dispatched the centaurs, then quickly caught up with the fleeing unicorn and captured him in his small suitcase. "Alright, you'll be living here for a long time. I'll occasionally take materials from you, but I won't cause you any serious harm," Locke assured the unicorn. The unicorn, a highly intelligent creature, showed anger and resentment in its eyes, but it couldn't help but bow its head under the eaves. Having been captured by Locke, it could only accept its fate of being domesticated. The unicorn's flesh, tail, hair, and even its horn were all excellent magical materials, and would undoubtedly be useful in the future. Locke had no intention of draining the pond to catch more than it could swallow. Sustainable development was the best approach. Of course, if it weren't for the small suitcase, the unicorn before him would likely have been completely transformed into magical material. Even if the legend said that killing a unicorn would fill its blood with a curse, it probably wouldn't have stopped Locke. After all, whatever else mattered, it had to have something. Actually, within the suitcase, there was also a small tribe of centaurs, settled there by Locke some time ago and well trained. At least on the surface, they wouldn't dare to provoke Locke. After discovering the unicorn, the centaurs took it upon themselves to protect it. However, Locke, in front of them, took some of its flesh and tail hair for use as materials. Locke had always felt that the wizarding world was too lenient with some conquered magical creatures, like the centaurs, who, after their defeat in the war with the wizards, were placed in the Forbidden Forest. Over time, however, these centaurs came to believe they were the masters of the Forbidden Forest. Perhaps the wizarding world felt the centaurs were incapable of causing any trouble. After all, compared to elves, their strength was limited. A single wizard could easily take on several. Locke, however, was not prepared to tolerate this situation. He would periodically warn them to remember who is the master. The resulting resentment and conflict was unavoidable, as the opposing sides' positions were inherently conflicting. When Locke returned to his office, he found the black cat circling in front of his door again. Seeing this, Locke sighed and said, "Hermione, when did you learn the Armenigus? You even hid it from me at first." "Ah, Godfather, you know." At this time, the black cat's mouth uttered the familiar voice of Hermione. Hermione didn't expect Locke to guess it so quickly. When she was practicing the Animagus, she secretly made many preparations. Even her roommates, Harry and Ron, were unaware, because Hermione knew they were all big mouths. After practicing it, she couldn't help but sneak over to see what Locke was doing, but she didn't expect that he would be discovered after a short time. Of course I know. After all, a strange black cat suddenly appears, and its behavior pattern is really abnormal. I must observe it more. At first, I thought someone sent it to investigate my situation, but later I found out it was you. Well, it seems that it is not easy to hide it from you, teacher. The black cat turned into Hermione again, patted his chest, suppressed his surprise, and then asked curiously, Teacher, what were you doing out so late? As he said, he came close to Locke and sniffed. It seems to smell like trees. Bang! Locke knocked Hermione's little head. Why are you still like a puppy? I just went outside the castle to practice spells. Ouch! Hermione screamed, covering her head with some unhappiness, but she didn't doubt it. Locke often practiced spells outside before, but since he could use the room of requirement, he practiced there most of the time. Without continuing to dwell on this issue, Hermione could not help but ask the question that concerned her most. Teacher, I recently found that senior sister Furin often comes to your office to find you. Is there something wrong? Is this the reason why you turn into a black cat and hang around my office almost every day? Locke smiled and pinched Hermione's small nose, and said, This is not your concern. Now go back and rest honestly, and don't miss the class tomorrow. There was some reluctance in her heart, but after looking at Locke's expression, Hermione still obediently returned to the dormitory, but she was muttering in her heart that she must be the same as those shameless senior sisters, wanting to get close to the teacher. I must not let her succeed. Chapter 229 Departure Countdown. Because Fleur kept interrupting his office, Locke spent the entire morning searching for the Delacour family and went directly to their door. He offered them their treasured magical books and family collections as compensation for the breach of contract, effectively settling the matter. Locke didn't care about the assets. After all, he had no shortage of galleons. What mattered more was the ancient family's secret magic. Therefore, the financial compensation was merely a withdrawal from the Delacour family's cash reserves, not a wholesale liquidation of assets. Gazing at the nearly empty family collection, the Delacour family head's expression was grim, yet he breathed a sigh of relief. Rumors circulated in the wizarding world that Locke was the mastermind behind Voldemort's final destruction, especially with the recent endorsement of several pure-blood families suspected of being Death Eaters, further solidifying the rumors that he might be the Dark Lord's heir. For such a powerful wizard, having accidentally offended him before, it was a fortunate outcome to settle the matter with only this price. With copies of the family's secret magic books, there was no need to worry about them being lost. They also preserved most of their assets, allowing the Delacour family to maintain its current status. Why are you here again? My affairs with your family are settled. Shortly after returning to the academy, Locke encountered Fleur again. Mother already told me, Fleur said with a grateful smile. I'm here to thank Mr. Locke for sparing our family. These are the pastries I prepared myself. They're not worth mentioning, but I just wanted to express my gratitude. You don't have to do this, she said. Locke didn't turn her away, but opened the door and let Fleur in. The two exchanged pleasantries. Fleur, seeking conversation, asked Locke some magical questions, which Locke readily answered. His current magical knowledge might not be as good as that of a century-old wizard like Dumbledore, but it was far beyond the reach of ordinary wizards. In reality, just as the rumors had it, if Locke truly desired to become the Dark Lord, it would be a piece of cake. Moreover, he was far more formidable than that bald-headed Voldemort. Even Dumbledore in his prime wouldn't have been his match in a head-on battle. Fleur had been merely looking for a topic to discuss, but she hadn't expected Locke's detailed explanation, even including numerous tips and tricks, which benefited her immensely. She felt that Locke's skills far surpassed those of her professors at Buxbottom's. Deeply impressed, and considering Locke had saved her before, Fleur's gaze towards Locke was involuntarily captivated. This young lady looks like she's inviting me to give her more in-depth instruction, Locke thought to himself, observing Fleur's expression. Fleur's Vila heritage made her even more alluring when she was aroused, and Locke knew it was time for him to take the initiative. The next morning, Hermione came to see Locke and bumped into Fleur as she emerged from his office. Perhaps because Locke had taught her too much the previous night, Fleur, whose Vila bloodline had just begun to develop, now looked a bit tired and languid. However, her face was rosy and radiant, and the allure in her eyes made even Hermione, a fellow girl, startled. But then, alarm bells rang in Hermione's mind. She had emerged from the teacher's room so early, and in such a state. What had happened? Hermione was still young, but she wasn't completely clueless. Thinking of the possible consequences, she tentatively asked Fleur, "Senior Fleur, why are you here so early to see the teacher? Is there something going on?" Nothing, nothing. I just had some magical questions for Mr. Locke." Fleur was a bit flustered at the sudden encounter with Hermione, and her answer was a bit flustered, which only confirmed Hermione's suspicions. HMPH, the girl couldn't help but pout. These Boxburton's girls were truly despicable, actually seducing their teacher. With that thought in mind, Hermione ignored Fleur, turned around, pushed open the office door, and slammed it shut. Entering the classroom, she saw the steamed buns placed on Locke's desk. She didn't offer her usual sweet greeting, but took one and took a deep bite. Her eating habits had changed significantly since following Locke. Seeing her like this, Locke smiled and said nothing. There were some things he couldn't hide. While doing so might have helped maintain harmony at first, it would have been a disaster later. Lately, Locke's main concern had been acquiring goblin artifacts, but this hadn't been going smoothly. Even his own investigations had yielded no substantial results. The goblins were keeping a close eye on this, otherwise Locke wouldn't be the first wizard to covet goblin artifacts. Nicholas Flamel had taken advantage of a special opportunity to obtain some, but many truly precious artifacts remained elusive. Finally, Locke decided that if covert methods didn't work before he left, he would simply rob them and return home immediately. Mr. Locke, I'm planning to come to England for an internship during the holidays. Do you have any recommendations? Fleur said with a hint of anticipation. That won't be necessary. By then, I might have already left the British wizarding world. Locke understood Fleur's meaning. This was the culmination of his recent efforts, but his mission was already underway. Or rather, I plan to travel and won't be in the wizarding world for at least a few years. What? Fleur was startled. But, so it's time to say goodbye. Unless you plan on traveling with me and only coming back once in a while, our relationship will end here. Locke looked at Fleur. After his in-depth guidance, her Vila bloodline had developed well. Frankly, Locke couldn't let her go. In that case, don't rush into a decision. I'll be leaving in about a week, and Hermione will be with me. If you're willing, pack your bags and come to my office next Thursday morning. It's a long journey, the mission's deadline had arrived. After much deliberation, Hermione finally decided to stay with Locke, but Locke knew Fleur was unlikely to do so. Fleur wasn't the type to recklessly sacrifice everything for love. She was also quite rational. He felt his predictions about a girl's feelings were pretty accurate, primarily due to his extensive experience. Perhaps if Locke were given more time, he could train Fleur to be inseparable from him, but time was what Locke lacked the most right now, especially with only a week left. He needed to wrap up everything. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 230 Build Your Own. Final exams concluded, and the Hogwarts students happily prepared to go home for the holidays. Locke and Hermione also packed their bags, but they weren't heading back to London, but directly back to the world of American TV. Just then, there was a knock on the office door, and Locke was surprised to see Fleur, dressed for travel. I'm not late, am I? Fleur said, her eyes flicking to Hermione. The two girls' gazes seemed to clash like swords. Locke's judgment of girls' intentions was indeed quite accurate, but he sometimes overlooked things, like when fighting for something, girls can make impulsive decisions. Of course you're welcome. Let's go now. Hold my hand. Fleur's choice was a bit surprising, but it didn't stop them from setting off. She grabbed Hermione and Fleur in each hand, contacted the system, and chose to return. So, in just one night, you traveled to a magical world, stayed there for 3 years, and those two girls are your reward? Peggy asked Locke in the study in Wisteria Town. The magical world in that world is far more prosperous than ours. It's not just a few wizards and witches, there are thousands and tens of thousands of wizards in Britain alone. I'll tell you all about it in detail. First, take a look at the gift I've prepared for you. Locke smiled and held out a faintly gleaming gemstone necklace. It was an alchemical product Locke had crafted himself, infused with the armor charm, healing charm, and rejuvenation charm. Multiple enchantments were a highly advanced alchemical technique. Locke had studied under Nicholas Flamel for quite some time, and this was his most satisfying creation. "You're trying to trick me with candy again," Peggy pouted, but she happily accepted the necklace and listened to Locke explain the materials and the enchantment. For girls, often all they need is an attitude, and Peggy was actually quite satisfied with that. As for the rest, she'd long since gotten used to it. Locke then told Peggy about the world of Harry Potter, focusing on some of the interesting things about Hogwarts. This piqued Peggy's interest, and she expressed her desire to see it someday. Peggy even went with Ashley to ask Hermione and Fleur about their experiences studying in the wizarding world. After hearing all this, Locke felt fortunate that he had found an opportunity to steal goblin alchemy materials before leaving, and ultimately chose not to rob them by force. Otherwise, if he had truly returned to the Harry Potter world, he would have been forced to become the Dark Lord and rule the wizarding world. Locke had already collected most of the interesting things in the Harry Potter world, and for now, he had no plans to go back. However, Hermione and Fleur would definitely return to visit their families in a few years, and when they did, he would take Peggy to Hogwarts and arrange for her to experience it for a while. As a school trustee, Locke could certainly do that. As for the reward for this mission, perhaps because Locke had been slacking off most of the time, and even used a sneak attack to defeat Voldemort in the end, the reward was only 2,000 potential points. While that might sound like a lot, the higher the power level of the mission, the greater the reward. Compared to the intensity of the Harry Potter world, these 2,000 potential points were even a bit too little. Fortunately, Locke had been prepared for this, and his rewards far exceeded that meager reward. Over the next few days, Locke busied himself with securing new identities for Hermione and Fleur, then contacted them about suitable schools. However, with summer vacation less than a month away, they only attended classes for about 2 weeks before finally enjoying their vacation. Seizing the opportunity, Locke took them to Los Angeles, both to relax and to attend to some business matters. It was Jennifer's invitation that had given Locke his first sudden wealth, and he had even secretly arranged for her to win a $1 million lottery ticket. This time, Locke didn't bother her. They were just close friends, having barely seen each other in a while, so it was only natural for them to be content. Within a few days of arriving in Los Angeles, Locke personally visited Wells Fargo's headquarters in San Francisco and, after a board meeting, solidified his position as chairman. After the board meeting, he met with Wells Fargo's senior management to confirm the bank's future direction. He also placed several of his own people within the top management team, primarily in finance and human resources, which he would be able to control. Possessing the ability to absorb divine thoughts greatly facilitated Locke's management. He no longer had to analyze his subordinates' minds and anticipate any potential missteps from his managers, allowing him to manage his business more easily and effortlessly. After everything was arranged, they returned to their Los Angeles hotel suite, where the girls were discussing magic. Following Peggy's return from the Harry Potter world, Ashley had signed a contract and begun studying magic. Ashley's own magical aptitude wasn't particularly high, placing her at the bottom of the group, but thankfully, she maintained a positive attitude and studied magic solely to bridge the gap between her and Locke. Over the years, Ashley had felt a sense of crisis. The girls around Locke were all exceptional, either incredibly intelligent like Peggy, exceptionally capable like Tang Wei, or even daughters of wealthy families with impressive backgrounds. Ashley, with her striking appearance, didn't stand out much around Locke, so she found her niche, consistently practicing yoga to stay in shape and diligently learning to be Locke's assistant, gradually replacing Tang Wei's position. Tang Wei's thoughts were more complicated. Unlike Ashley or Hermione, she couldn't rely on Locke for everything. Therefore, Locke had arranged for her to study in his asset management office, cultivating her as a trusted advisor. "Well, you said you were here to relax and have some fun, but you've been stuck in your hotel suite all day studying magic. Isn't that too boring?" Locke said to the girls back in their hotel room. "Without you as our star player, we'd just go shopping." "It's no different from New York," Ashley said. "Okay, it's my fault." Locke raised his hand to surrender. "Then do you want to go house hunting with me tomorrow? With the acquisition of Wells Fargo and the plan to invest in the media group in the future, the focus of my business will gradually shift here, so I plan to find a place to stay. I found a place I'm interested in, and you can choose the design you like together." "Okay, that's settled then." Hermione and Fleur were quite interested. Hermione even said, "It would be best if it was a castle like Hogwarts. After it's designed and decorated, we can set up some magic in the castle, just like Hogwarts School." "That's a good idea." but castle-style mansions are not easy to find near Los Angeles. If that doesn't work, we can buy a piece of land and build one ourselves. Chapter 231, Park Shootout. There are indeed a few castle-style mansions near Los Angeles, most of which were built many years ago, but only a few remain for sale. After visiting them, Rock and his group weren't particularly impressed. After some discussion, Rock decided to buy a piece of land and design and build one himself. He first selected a location, purchasing 3,800 acres encompassing beach, woodland, and mountain tops. He then hired a designer and worked together to finalize a construction plan. However, to ensure quality and quantity, the projected completion would take at least 3 years, so Rock purchased another mansion. This was also quite old, similar in some ways to Rock's previous farmhouse, but smaller, at just over 800 acres. Some of the trees were over a century old, and the land was covered in smooth, well-maintained lawns, perfect for horse breeding, golf, tennis, and hosting parties. The original owner, an elderly woman, decided to return to her native Ireland to enjoy her retirement and no longer had the energy to maintain it, so she simply sold it. Outside the villa, there were horses and a herd of Montpelier cattle, and white-tailed deer and elk roamed the woods. Locke redesigned the property, primarily renovating the rooms and resurfacing the helipad. After completing these tasks that morning at the hotel, Locke smiled and said, "Finally, we've solved our accommodation problem. We'll go for a drive later, and we can have a picnic at noon." The girls enthusiastically agreed. Locke didn't choose a remote location, so they drove to a beautiful park. They parked in a spot outside the park, unloaded the prepared meals and drinks from the backseat refrigerator, and dug out 2 blankets. All equipped, they headed into the park. "I found a great spot. Let's hurry, or someone else will take it," Hermione urged, her eyes sharp, quickly pointing to a spot. About 10 minutes later, the girls were happily sitting or sprawled on the blankets, their faces beaming, their faces brimming with joy, their faces filled with food and drinks, casually chatting. "These leisurely days are truly wonderful," Ashley sighed, taking a sip of her drink. Locke smiled at 3 beautiful young women in bikinis sunbathing on a blanket about 7 or 8 meters away, and said, "This is a great spot." Hermione picked well. Ashley glanced at the 3 young women and curled her lips. "Do they look good like this?" "Of course not as pretty as you, but it's just a psychological thing. It's always hard not to take a second look at something free," Locke replied casually. Compared to the girl next to Locke, these 3 women were indeed a bit inferior, not on the same level as the other girls. "This place is nice." "Where is it?" Peggy asked casually. "Esworth Park," Locke replied, looking at the people playing in the park before him and sighing. "It's so peaceful and quiet. Oh my God. Why is there a baby here?" Just then, a woman's surprised cry came from the distance. Following the sound, Locke saw a small baby a few dozen meters away, placed on a children's manual carousel. Because they were quite far away, Peggy and the others didn't hear it. They were still happily eating and chatting. Frowning, Locke was just considering whether to go and take a look when he saw 4 men in black sprinting over. The woman, unaware, had simply picked up the baby and shouted, "Whose baby is this?" Hermione and the others had also heard the noise and, looking in the direction of the voice, saw 4 men in black rushing in front of the woman. "Hand over the child." The woman glanced at the 4 men with fierce eyes and instinctively took a step back, holding the child. "You?" The men's attire and demeanor didn't look like those who would be caring for children, nor did they look like bodyguards. Ashley couldn't help but ask, "What's going on?" Bang! At that moment, a gunshot rang out, and the woman holding the baby screamed and fell to the ground, blood gushing from her leg. "Oh my God!" Fleur screamed, reaching for her wand. Locke quickly held her hand down. "Leave it to me. Don't use magic carelessly, especially in public." With that, Locke had a gun in his hand. Using a gun was better in this situation, and it would save Locke from any trouble later. With 2 quick, rapid gunshots, 2 of the 4 men in black were instantly killed, both shot in the head. As he fired, Locke himself quickly ran in that direction. From his angle, the other 2 men in black overlapped with a woman, making it difficult for him to shoot. He intended to get closer before striking and inspecting the woman's injuries, but in the blink of an eye, he had already covered more than 20 meters. Hermione, Fleur, and Ashley all stared at the scene nervously. Peggy, however, remained remarkably calm. She surveyed her surroundings and suddenly warned, "Be careful. There's a black SUV at 3 o'clock." Peggy's voice was soft, but Locke heard it clearly. He abruptly changed direction and hid behind a nearby tree, shouting, "Everyone get down. Don't move." Americans were experienced in gunfights, and despite some screaming, most stayed put, lying flat on the ground. The next moment, the window of the black SUV Peggy mentioned opened halfway, and an automatic rifle emerged, aiming at Locke with a furious barrage of fire, sending wood chips flying from the tree where Locke was hiding. Bang, bang, bang. Locke, naturally, wouldn't hold back. He found an angle and fired repeatedly, leaving several bullet holes in the black SUV's door. If he hadn't wanted to show off his exceptional marksmanship, he would have shot the gunman in the head. Even so, the gunman inside paused, startled by Locke's accuracy. Locke's firing stopped, revealing his empty magazine. He quickly reloaded, and the gunman in the car tentatively raised his head again. Bang! By then, Locke felt the bullet holes in the door were nearly filled. He reloaded and quickly moved closer to the SUV. Before the gunman in the driver's seat could even take aim, a bullet pierced his right eye, drawing a spray of blood from the back of his head. Locke quickly approached the car, pointed his gun at the last person inside, and shouted, "Open the door slowly, throw out the gun, and crawl out." As he did so, Locke gestured for Ashley and the others to observe their surroundings. There was no movement from the car, but Locke remained unhurried, his gun still in hand. "I'll count to 3. If you don't surrender, I'll shoot you." His voice was calm, yet his resolve was palpable. At the same time, several men, armed with guns, appeared nearby. These were Locke's bodyguards, but he usually kept them on guard from a distance. With his abilities, he didn't need to worry about minor incidents. If a situation arose that Locke couldn't handle, these bodyguards would be useless. He only had them to deal with minor incidents. Before Locke could finish counting, the car's rear door suddenly opened, and a man in black emerged, turning and running off. Bang, bang. With 2 gunshots, the man in black was struck in both legs. A wheelchair was likely his only option for the rest of his life. He didn't kill him outright this time, hoping to keep a suspect alive so he could understand who was behind the incident. Today's shootout had been somewhat unexpected, and Locke probably didn't think it had much to do with him, but since he was involved, he had to know who the other party was. He stepped forward and removed the man's arms. Taking advantage of this moment, Locke used his divine mind capture, raising an eyebrow slightly. This plot felt a little familiar. Chapter 232, Not a Respectable Church. "Sir, are you okay?" a bodyguard asked Locke nervously. If anything happened to their employer, it would be more than just losing their jobs. "I'm fine. You keep an eye on him and contact the police. I'll go check on that lady." After giving the bodyguards a casual order, Locke ran to the woman who had been shot, comforting her while checking her injuries. Fortunately, the bullet didn't hit the artery or the bone. "You'll be fine, Mom," Locke said to the woman. Locke's voice was gentle and sunny, which calmed the woman down. Then, as if she had thought of something, she shouted, "The baby was taken away by those 2 men. I couldn't stop them. It's okay. I've contacted the police. They'll handle it." Locke looked at the woman. She was obviously a very kind person. Even after being shot, she still cared about his strange baby. He ordered the accompanying bodyguard to bring the first aid kit. Ashley also arrived at this time and helped treat the woman's wounds. Locke glanced at the bodies of the 2 men in black nearby and simply asked, "When will the Los Angeles police arrive?" "At most a few minutes. The ambulance has been contacted," a bodyguard replied. "Sir, your behavior is extremely dangerous." "Don't worry, I know what I'm doing." Locke didn't get impatient. He knew this was the bodyguard's job. They were all carefully selected by Damon, but he didn't know Locke's background. As he said this, Locke glanced into the distance. On an overpass a few hundred meters away, a tall man was holding a baby as it left. It wasn't one of the 2 men in black who had just escaped, but a familiar celebrity face. A few minutes later, an ambulance and a police car arrived. Locke carried the woman to the ambulance and handed her his business card. "You're a good lady. If you have any difficulties with medical expenses, please call me and I can help." The woman glanced at Locke's bodyguards, realizing he was likely well off. She thanked him gratefully and was then escorted to the ambulance by a nurse. "Thank you for your bravery, Mr. Locke." "I'm Detective Rostenkovsky," said a police officer who had been notified and knew Locke's identity. Honestly, the detective hadn't expected such a well-known figure as Locke to take such a heroic action. Furthermore, Locke's marksmanship seemed exceptional, practically a crack shot. Just wondering if you have time, Mr. Locke, to come back and give a statement with me, Detective Rostenkovsky asked tentatively. Locke thought for a moment, checked his watch, and said trashly, "You and the bodyguards should go back to the hotel first. I'll go to the police station and be back soon. It won't take long." "Thank you very much for your cooperation, Mr. Locke. You're much more approachable than those wealthy men I've dealt with before." Detective Rostenkovsky couldn't help but sigh after recording his statement. "Maybe it's just that their reasons for coming to the police station are different from mine. I hope I can be of some help this time." Shaking hands with Detective Rostenkovsky, Locke said this with a hint of regret, but in reality, he knew he probably wouldn't find anything. Locke had originally discovered the action film The Bodyguard because of Monica Bellucci, but he was impressed by the killer's performance. Thinking of this, Locke pondered and contacted Damon again. He seemed to have retired from the criminal world, so it wouldn't be appropriate for Lorraine to interact with him. But before Damon arrived, perhaps he could watch Mr. Smith's performance. Just as he was thinking this, Detective Rostenkovsky said, "One more personal matter, Detective Locke. My daughter and I are both fans of your books. If you're free, I'd like to invite you to dinner." "I didn't expect your daughter to like fantasy, too," Locke smiled. "That's quite unusual. Actually, it's your latest, The Snow Queen. I didn't expect your new book to be such a departure from your previous works. I haven't read much since I bought it, but my daughter, Bernie, loves it." "Bernie?" "Yes," Rostenkovsky smiled fondly. "Bernie is my eldest daughter, Bernadette. She's 12 years old and attends St. Marian's School. Despite her young age, she's been helping out at home for a long time. If it weren't for her, my wife would have a hard time raising so many children on her own. She's a gift from God to us, I believe it," Locke smiled. "This book has always leaned towards fairy tales. I wrote it on a whim, trying to write something different, but I hope your Lord of Mysteries won't give up on serializing it," Rostenkovsky asked. "Of course not. Ice Princess was just a spur-of-the-moment creation. I'm not particularly adept at this genre. Lord of Mysteries has been on schedule, publishing one book every 6 months. It just so happens that I'm in Los Angeles for a visit, so I'm honored to have the opportunity to attend the detective's family gathering." "That's wonderful," Rostenkovsky said with a smile. "Here's my home address. We look forward to seeing you tonight." After the man mentioned his daughter Bernadette's name, Locke confirmed his appearance, connecting the detective to Bernadette's father from The Big Bang Theory and readily agreeing. Leaving the police station, Locke used his previous magic marker to quickly catch up with the down-and-out killer, Mr. Smith. He was now in a small, single-family building with a red theme and white windows and doors, reminiscent of a church. But Locke knew it was a place that only looked like a church. As if noticing Locke standing at the door, a young woman in a nun's robe smiled and opened the door. "You look unfamiliar. Is this your first time?" Locke glanced at the woman. The material of the nun's robe was unusual, giving it a slightly elusive quality. "I'm looking for someone," Locke said with a smile. "I'm afraid we don't have the person you're looking for here." The woman immediately looked wary. "Are you a private investigator?" "Just looking for a friend," Locke said, pulling out a Franklin. "Can I come in now?" "Don't worry, there won't be any trouble." The woman hesitated, then saw Locke pull out another. Finally, she took the money from Locke's hand and said, "You may come in, but don't act out of line." Once inside, they saw another woman wearing a nun's robe that only covered half of the front, leaving her entire back, waist, hips, and legs exposed. This was certainly not a proper church. Chapter 233, The Relationship is Really Good. The first door they passed was open, and a voice emanated from within. The woman leading the way explained calmly, "This is Jiu-Jitsu training. It soothes nerves and relieves stress. If you're interested, I'm also quite skilled in it." Locke smiled, saying nothing, as the two of them continued on their way. They arrived at a room adorned with a Queen of Hearts playing card. The woman leading the way knocked on the door and said, "Miss Donna, someone wants to see you." "Hold on," a voice replied, and after a moment, the door opened. Locke raised an eyebrow slightly. It was indeed Malena, the woman he had envied in his previous life. Speaking of which, that part of her was irreversible. It was still stored on his hard drive before Locke's time travel. "All right, you can leave now. I don't think you'll be interested in what's coming next," Locke said to the woman leading the way. She nodded and left, and Locke smiled at Miss Donna. She had long, straight, slightly unkempt black hair, large eyes with pointed, slanted corners, a vixen-like quality. Her upper lip was slightly thin, while her lower lip was plump, giving her a very alluring look. At that moment, she was wearing a dark red corset, black suspender stockings, and high-top black leather boots, which perfectly showcased her explosive figure. "Hey, are you here for treatment?" the other party asked hesitantly. "Actually, I came to see Mr. Smith to see if he needs any help," Locke smiled after sizing him up. "What Smith?" Miss Donna was stunned for a moment, a hint of nervousness in her voice. "It's the man hiding behind the clothes rack by your door," Locke continued with a smile. "Mr. Smith, I need an explanation for what happened in the park just now." "Explanation? Who are you? A police officer, a bodyguard, a private investigator?" a deep voice echoed. "I'm just a novelist passing through," Locke said, "but I think I have the right to know the cause of this incident, writer?" "Haha, that's not your business. Go away." "It seems like things are quite complicated," Locke asked, but the other party didn't respond. He thought for a moment and said, "You must be short of funds right now." "What do you mean?" Smith asked, his eyes narrowed. Locke pulled out a thick stack of Franklin notes and said, "I don't know what happened, but this should be helpful. I really don't like people who prey on innocent babies, so could you please teach them a lesson for me? If anything comes of it, please let this person know. I'm a bit curious." Locke finally gave Donna Damon's contact information. The other party let Donna take the money, then after a moment's silence, asked, "What do you want? Just an answer or a good performance?" Locke nodded and turned to leave. Smith frowned as he watched Locke go downstairs. He then looked at the Chao bill in Donna's hand, took it, flicked it briefly, and put it in his pocket, silent and unsettled. "Who's interested in joining me for a family dinner tonight?" Locke asked, returning to the hotel room. "Family dinner?" Fleur looked at Locke. "It's Detective Rostenkowski from the day before. He's a fan of my books and invited me to his family dinner." "Anyone interested?" "Not interested," Peggy replied, her gaze fixed on the magic book in her hand. It was Hermione who said, "I'd like to go." She spoke first, and Fleur and Ashley, who had been hesitant, decided to stay at the hotel. Following Detective Rostenkowski's address, Locke and Hermione quickly arrived at the address, a typical American suburban single-family house. After knocking on the door, it quickly opened. "Good evening, Detective," Locke said, smiling and greeting Detective Rostenkowski, handing him the gift he had prepared. "We're honored to have you here, and to bring a gift." "That's very kind of you, just some simple things." After a few pleasantries, Detective Rostenkowski ushered them into the room. "Dinner's still being prepared. Let's enjoy some refreshments in the living room." "Hey, Bernie, look who's here," Detective Rostenkowski called out as he entered the house. Locke, the kitchen and living room weren't separated. Mrs. Rostenkowski and a young woman were busy in the kitchen. The young woman turned and recognized Locke. Locke, in turn, immediately recognized the blonde, bespectacled woman as Bernadette from The Big Bang Theory. Excited, Bernadette ran over, not noticing she was still holding a kitchen knife. As she neared, she realized something was amiss and quickly put the knife back down. Then, trotting over again, she greeted with a soft, childlike voice, "Hello, Mr. Locke." "Hello." Locke smiled and greeted her, offering a handshake. "Welcome to our home. Dinner will be ready soon. I look forward to seeing you cook." After a few polite exchanges, Bernadette continued helping in the dining room while Locke and Hermione joined Detective Rostenkowski on the living room sofa to chat. "This is Bernie. She's at St. Marian's School." "Sounds like a church school." "Yes, my wife is a devout Christian, and that's her alma mater, too. But Bernie doesn't live on campus. I believe there's no substitute for the constant presence of a parent." "You're right," Locke nodded. "Parental companionship is essential for a child's growth." "That's right." Detective Rostenkowski, delighted to have found a kindred spirit, couldn't help but chat with Locke about his own daughter, sharing a lot about Bernadette. Later, he glanced toward the kitchen and whispered, "Bernie is 12 years old, but I've noticed she hasn't grown in a while. I'm about the same height, and my wife isn't short either, but if Bernie really hasn't grown, that's really worrying." Locke had no answer. Could he say that Bernadette from The Big Bang Theory wouldn't be much different in a decade? Fortunately, Detective Rostenkowski only sighed. Just then, a louder and louder noise rose from upstairs, and several children rushed into the living room. There were 4 boys and 5 girls in total. Locke glanced at Detective Rostenkowski and thought that this guy had a really good relationship with his wife. Chapter 234 Money is not that easy to get. Several children were chattering loudly, surrounding Locke, a guest, out of curiosity. Seeing that Locke didn't seem to like the noise, Detective Rostenkowski warned him a few times, but to no avail. Then, a clear voice rang out, "Stop it!" The 5 children immediately stopped their mischief and looked at Bernadette, who was holding the plates. "What did I say? Don't disturb the guests. Go sit down." Without waiting for Bernadette to repeat herself a second time, the children immediately found their own seats and sat down, not daring to make any more noise. Sure enough, she's already showing some signs of the future. Seeing Bernadette's childish, sweet voice so intimidating to her younger siblings, her outward gentleness and shyness concealing a hard-to-disguise strength, Locke couldn't help but think, not only will my colleagues at work, but even Penny, the school's big sister since childhood, be afraid to face a serious Bernadette. It seems the signs are already forming. The ensuing dinner was quite peaceful. Locke and Detective Rostenkowski mostly chatted about plot points and settings from Locke's book. The others mostly listened quietly, occasionally exchanging a few words. What Locke hadn't expected was Bernadette's constant shyness, her frequent glances at him out of the corner of her eye, which struck him as a bit strange. As they left, Detective Rostenkowski said to Locke, "By the way, Mr. Locke, I was notified this afternoon about the incident at the park. Headquarters has taken over. There's supposed to be some trouble. I understand. I'll keep an eye on it." Locke nodded in understanding. Clearly, someone had suppressed the matter, but Locke knew Mr. Smith would teach the mastermind a lesson. Back at the hotel, Locke smiled and said, "There's going to be a wonderful show soon. Do you want to watch it?" "What's the show?" Ashley asked. "It's something to do with what happened at the park during the day," Locke said as he found a basin in the room, half filled it with water, and chanted a spell. A scene quickly appeared in the basin. The scene showed an abandoned apartment building, with 5 men in black gathered at the bottom floor. "How did the boss know that the guy was here?" "Wasn't it just a guess?" one of the men in black asked. "That's not just a guess. The boss used to be an expert in criminal behavior analysis. He can analyze things that we guys can't," one of the men nearby said. "Forensic behavioral consultant, how many times do I have to tell you before you remember?" the bearded leader in black said. As the door opened, the first one in the group was about to push it open. Several men held him back, saying, "Boss, don't you think it would be better to walk behind? Leaders who hide in the back only get leftovers." "First come, first served is the truth," the leader grinned. "This guy is surprisingly interesting," Locke commented from the side. "Weren't those the same people who stole the baby in the park earlier? Why are they suddenly here?" "Obviously, someone else has taken the baby back from them." Locke briefly explained that Mr. Smith had actually been observing near the park during the day. He had actually spotted and intercepted the 2 men in black when they snatched the baby and fled. Locke then found Mr. Smith at that shady church. Realizing their intention to kill the baby, the girls suddenly felt a surge of sympathy, their eyes filled with anger as they looked at the men in black. Seeing their men gathering at the apartment building, Ashley asked directly, "There are so many of them. Locke, do you want to send someone to help?" "Don't worry, if needed, it's just a matter of displacing. We'll just watch the show," Locke said. In reality, the system hadn't issued a task, and the previous meeting with Mr. Smith hadn't triggered it either. Locke wasn't very motivated to act, and he simply planned to treat this incident as a real-time movie. This made Locke suspect something was wrong with the system. Before returning from the Harry Potter world, it had reported changes in the American TV world. After returning, it simply stated that there had been a disturbance in space-time and that some changes might occur. No other explanation was given, leaving Locke somewhat bewildered. Violence is the most interesting thing in the world, the most worthwhile thing to watch. Seeing his men gathered, the leading man in black on the screen drew his gun and said slowly, "Have those on the roof ready. Everyone, brace yourself. Our Mr. Smith is a crack shot. I hate those good guys in movies who suddenly appear to be heroes, so don't let that happen to you. Kill the baby, Mr. Smith, and the nurse too, or I won't just take back your money." The men in black nodded repeatedly. They knew the methods of this bearded leader. Bang, bang, bang. With the men in black moving swiftly, Mr. Smith and them engaged in a fierce exchange of fire. Most girls don't particularly enjoy watching gunfights, but knowing that what they were seeing was real, a hint of nervousness crossed their faces. Mr. Smith, protecting the baby, had already been automatically categorized as a hero. Watching Mr. Smith display his prowess on the screen, he stepped onto a table, leaped into the air, and spun, firing frantically with both pistols. The gunmen surrounding him instantly erupted in blood, screaming and falling to the ground. He then rolled onto his back on a flatbed and slid away quickly. Two gunmen who had rushed over were instantly shot and tumbled down the stairs. The flatbed crashed into one of the gunmen, and Mr. Smith, taking advantage of the situation, raised his gun and fired a single shot into the man's head. The girls watched with alarm, and Locke couldn't help but sigh. Mr. Smith was truly formidable. And unlike in the movies, with Locke's support, he had ample weapons at his disposal. His marksmanship was truly top-notch. While he couldn't compare to Locke's effortless headshots, every burst of fire from his gun was enough to bring down a foe. In the end, he single-handedly eliminated more than half of the gunmen. The bearded leader, without a word of first come, first served, saw the situation was dire and decisively fled with his 4 trusted men. Mr. Smith couldn't help but feel elated. He'd been struggling financially lately, and the gun he was carrying had belonged to the mother of the previous baby, so he had been conserving his ammunition. Consequently, he'd been rather embarrassed during the previous firefight, forced to flee in panic. Now that a financial backer had provided him with some funds, he naturally wouldn't skimp on himself. The previous firefight had wiped out his earlier embarrassment. After the firefight, Mr. Smith looked out at the sky, thought for a moment, and said to Donna, who was holding the baby, "Let's go to the bar where the heavy metal band is playing." "That's ridiculous. Just because Oliver likes heavy metal. That means his mother lived there," Donna said, holding the baby she'd named. "That's our only clue," Smith said, adding, "Besides, we took $10,000 from that young man before. That's not easy money." Chapter 235 A Little Accident. Why did those people have to kill a baby? After the thrilling gunfight, Smith and Miss Donna hurried on their way, and the girls started discussing. Maybe they wanted to silence someone, like, an entire family, Ashley said first. The baby's entire family was killed, and he was accidentally saved. "I think maybe the baby is the child of an enemy." As the girls chattered, Mr. Smith, the baby, and Miss Donna arrived in front of a rock bar. Shortly after they entered, 3 or 4 black SUVs arrived outside the bar, and more than a dozen clearly trained professionals got out. They had a different demeanor from the previous group. As they entered, Mr. Smith, who was investigating upstairs, roughly figured out the baby's origins. It turned out that someone had cultivated the baby specifically for bone marrow transplants, and the other party clearly didn't want it to succeed. How insane. To cure a disease, they'd target a newborn, Fleur couldn't help but exclaim. "That baby is truly pitiful," Hermione sighed. "Wow, killers are really creative." Locke, already aware of the situation, focused slightly differently. He watched Mr. Smith kill a man by stabbing a carrot into his left eye socket and thought, "That's similar to the famous Mr. Night Stalker using a pencil." A moment later, Mr. Smith emerged from a side alley, carrying the baby and Miss Donna, and entered the small inn across the street. The professional team, having found nothing, packed up and drove away. "All right, that's over for now. We should rest up." Retracting his magic, Locke knew there would be another exciting shootout. Mr. Smith, while exercising vigorously, had taken out the 8 gunmen who arrived one by one, but right now, he had no interest in watching other people's movies. Seeing that there was no more fun to watch, the girls cleaned up and went to the bathroom to take a shower together. Then Peggy and Hermione returned to their rooms. Locke hugged the still damp Ashley and Fleur, enjoying himself. Of course, it would be more fun. The next day, Locke took the girls to watch a live-action film. This time, Mr. Smith went to Hammerson Guns. The men who had been hunting the baby were using the company's latest guns, only a few months old and incredibly expensive. But a good weapon depends on who uses it. Ultimately, these guys only added to Mr. Smith's previous night's spree. Early this morning, Mr. Smith went to Hammerson Guns to investigate. As expected, he encountered the portly, bearded man in black who had led the assault. He worked for the Hammerson owner. After another fierce exchange, Mr. Smith figured out the whole story. The baby was actually created by a councilman who had proposed a crackdown on illegal guns in order to save his life. The proposal was supposed to eliminate illegal guns, but with fewer people illegally owning them, the willingness of ordinary people to buy them would inevitably decrease. Furthermore, those who illegally own guns had to pay for their guns, effectively cutting off the revenue stream of many arms companies. Los Angeles's prosperity is plagued by gangs. If the gun cleanup proposal succeeds and the councilman secures widespread support, it's certain to attract many more to follow. Hammerson's core business is in Los Angeles and the surrounding metropolitan area. This proposal impacts Hammerson's core interests, particularly with the company's newly developed and rapidly expanding guns. This has put Hammerson at odds with the councilman, and the attack on the baby is intended to force the councilman to change his mind. The whole situation is relatively simple. After Smith understood the situation, he arranged for Ms. Donna and the baby to be settled, then contacted the councilman and met him on a plane. However, it was clear that these politicians were largely unprincipled, and the councilman, a typical politician, had already compromised with the Hammerson boss. After abducting and killing the councilman on the plane and escaping, Smith then engaged in a high-altitude chase with the councilman's bodyguards. Without a parachute, the two sides glided through the air, firing frantically, leaving more than a dozen bodies on the ground. Even Locke was impressed by their reckless devotion. If he got carried away and opened his parachute even a little too slowly, he'd be tumbled into a puddle, beyond the reach of even the gods. Of course, Mr. Smith finally opened his parachute successfully and landed in an abandoned factory on the outskirts of the city. Just then, the phone rang. It was Damon, who had flown overnight to Los Angeles, asking him what to do next. Watching the scene, the bearded leader arrived at the abandoned factory and approached Mr. Smith, wounded by a gunshot wound to the shoulder. "Why are you here again?" Mr. Smith, lying on the ground inside the factory, had been struck by debris during the landing, leaving him dizzy and without his weapon. He could only gasp for air. "Yes, Smith, but how can you escape this time?" A smug grin spread across the bearded leader's face. With that, he led his men away and took Mr. Smith away. Locke thought for a moment and said, "This time, I need you to do something urgent. Go meet this man. He seems to be in a bit of trouble. Provide some assistance if needed." Damon said nothing more, simply asking Locke to send the address and Mr. Smith's information. After giving Damon Mr. Smith's information, Locke tracked the bearded leader's movements in real time, tracking them to the basement of a villa where he reunited with the owner of Hammerson. "Some are smart, some are foolish. It looks like we've switched places," the Hammerson owner said slowly, staring at Smith, who was being escorted before him. "It has indeed changed. It's the cycle of fate, the fate of an idiot." The bearded leader also stood in front of Smith triumphantly. "Now tell me where the woman and the baby are. Your plan is over. Congressman Henry S. Worth is dead. You can no longer threaten him with a baby. Everyone will believe that his death was done by you arms dealers, and his gun ban bill will get more sympathy and support. Do you really think that the people who hired me will compromise because of the death of a congressman?" The bearded leader said triumphantly. "Didn't you read the latest news? The congressman's plane had an accident and crashed into the sea. The body has disappeared. Now, as long as we kill the woman and the baby, everything will be over. You can't cover this up." Smith was surprised at first, and then doubted. "Since you have succeeded, why are you still looking for them? Don't be clever, Mr. Smith." At this time, the boss of Hammerson Company spoke. "As long as you are willing to spend money, you can do many unimaginable things in this country, such as," following the gesture of the boss of Hammerson Company, Donna, holding the baby, was dragged to the basement by two men in black suits. Seeing this scene, Locke raised his eyebrows slightly. This seemed to be different from the plot in the movie. It seemed that there was a small accident, and the boss of Hammerson Company had a very bad personality. Chapter 236 Return to the Fairy Tale World. Upon seeing Donna, Smith's eyes widened and he began to struggle. The Hammerson boss and the bearded man laughed simultaneously. "Ho ha ho ha. Smith, now it's time to pay. Your chivalrous behavior these past 2 days has cost me a fortune. Since you want to be a knight, I will mercifully let you witness the death of the one you protect. This is the proper ending. Leave it to me." The bearded leader obediently drew his gun and pointed it at Donna. Bang! 2 shots rang out, and everyone was stunned. Miss Donna and the baby in her arms were safe, but the bearded man let out a scream and fell to the ground, bloody wounds in his shoulder and chest. The surrounding gunmen reacted immediately, raising their weapons. But before they could see their enemy, a series of gunshots rang out, and all 4 gunmen in the basement fell to the ground, including the 2 holding Smith. Unable to find anyone holding them hostage, Smith suddenly leaped to his feet, knocking the Hammerson boss, who was about to draw his gun, to the ground. He glanced at the basement entrance and saw a middle-aged man standing there with a gun. My boss told me to tell you he's aware of the situation and is very pleased with your performance, Damon said, holding the gun in his right hand and shaking his phone with his left. Who are you? The Hammerson boss looked at Damon through gritted teeth. Whatever you want, I can pay you handsomely. Damon curled his lips. These people always used money as a last resort, and while it worked quite well most of the time, it was useless for Damon, now worth tens of millions and not particularly materialistic. Slowly putting his phone away, Damon gestured to Smith. Aren't you going to make a final decision yourself? Without a word, Smith and Damon stared at each other for a moment. Straining through the pain, Smith stood up, pulled a gun from the fallen gunman next to him, and pointed it at the Hammerson boss. No. You can't. Bang! A hole appeared on the Hammerson boss's forehead. Damon clapped his hands, as if applauding, then pulled out a black travel bag from behind and threw it in front of Smith. This is the subsequent payment. There is also a contact number in it. If you want to find a suitable job, you can call this number. Who are you? Smith glanced at the travel bag and turned his gaze back to Damon. Don't worry, this is all legitimate security work. We won't let you do such a thing, Damon said, motioning to Donna and the baby in her arms, and left quietly. Looking at the place where Damon disappeared for a moment, Smith thought for a moment and opened the travel bag he left behind. Inside was a pile of US dollars, and they were all old bills with non-consecutive numbers, which were completely safe to use. He took a deep breath, zipped up the bag, and said to Donna, "Let's get out of here." Smith looked back at the baby and whispered, "We'll soon find a quiet, beautiful place to start anew. No one will hurt you again." Stepping out of the basement, Smith felt like he'd survived a catastrophe. They'd all survived, and the bag contained at least $300,000 or $400,000, enough to find a place to hide out for years. As for the mysterious man's invitation, he wasn't thinking about it yet. As the two of them, carrying the baby, exited the villa, a German shepherd suddenly darted over. It was the same one that had been with the owner of Hammerson, and it circled Smith. Smith chuckled at the German shepherd, patted its head, and motioned for it to follow. After Smith and his group left, Damon reappeared. He still had to clean up the mess. After all, the owner of Hammerson was no small figure. The incident with Mr. Smith and the baby didn't affect Locke and the other girls' vacation in Los Angeles. With school almost starting, Locke planned a trip back to the fairy tale world to make arrangements for his experiences in the Harry Potter world. Locke also planned to bring Fleur with him on this trip. He had a lot to do in the fairy tale world, so he needed her help. As for Peggy and Hermione, they were still a little younger and were in the process of rapidly learning, so Locke didn't intend to distract them. "I never expected to actually be in a fairy tale world, and to actually have to work with a legendary evil queen," Fleur said to Locke, curiously surveying the palace grounds. "Not just the queen, but Snow White is on our side now," Locke said with a smile, but he thought to himself, what's wrong with working with the queen? After all, without big breasts, how can you win people's hearts? Locke had already described the nature of this world, and Fleur simply sighed inwardly. After all, the story of Snow White was deeply rooted in people's minds, and she hadn't expected Locke to distort it so completely. In fact, besides the queen, she was even more curious about Snow White's beauty. Young and beautiful girls like her are naturally confident, and naturally, they wanted to compete with Snow White. "Is she the wizard you met during your travels?" In the palace's study, the queen met Locke and Fleur. Because Fleur was introduced by Locke, the study, while less formal than the main hall, felt more intimate. Fleur Delacour greets the queen. Fleur performed a wizard salute, feeling the subtle pressure emanating from the queen. She knew that Locke's words about the queen being far more powerful than the fairy tales were true. The Delacour family? Why haven't I heard of them? The queen was puzzled, but she didn't take it too seriously. She could sense Fleur's magical bloodline, so she couldn't be an undercover agent of the church. "In that case, then you will take on the position of court mage in the palace. I'm also planning to gather the kingdom's noble children to teach magic together, so you can take on the teaching duties part-time." After a moment's thought, the queen made the arrangements. "Does it seem the queen is ready to implement her plan?" Locke interrupted. "Indeed, I've modified the meditation method you taught me, dividing it into several levels. First, gather these noble children. Those with the aptitude will naturally learn it. Once they become wizards, they'll naturally side with us, seeking more powerful magic in a longer life." The queen was also calculating. She had modified the meditation method she received from Locke, dividing it into several levels. The basic level only allowed one to cultivate some magical power, not anything like immortality. But its advantage was its simplicity. Anyone with limited talent or a willingness to work hard could basically learn it. This time, she was going to teach it free of charge to these noble children, even the heirs. Previously, the queen had ruled the kingdom primarily through sheer force and coercion, exercising an iron fist. This meditation method, combined with some distribution of benefits, could foster a truly aligned interest group. To take, one must first give. Once these noble children became wizards, it would be impossible for them to cooperate with a church, whose motto was that extraordinary power belonged only to the Lord. But how many would forego the opportunity to achieve transcendence, especially when the more advanced meditation techniques could even extend lifespan? Furthermore, to obtain these advanced meditation techniques, they must demonstrate merit, not only in future wars of kingdom expansion but also in battles against the church. This way, these individuals would be completely bound to the queen, their fundamental interests aligned, and these nobles would be unlikely to defect in a future war against the church. Otherwise, the church would have numerous means of wooing the nobles. The countries where the church currently holds significant influence rely not only on the royal families but also on the support of numerous nobles, both large and small. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 237 Multi-Headed Dragon. Worried about the numerous noble children, the queen certainly couldn't let them stay in the palace forever, so she planned to build a magic academy on the outskirts of the royal city. I've already arranged the construction of the magic academy, so don't worry about it. But I have one more thing for you, and that is to go out and help me invite a potion master. Potion master? Locke raised an eyebrow slightly. That's right. He's the most outstanding potions master in the world. Since we are going to establish a magic academy, we must have good teachers. I have written to several of my friends, and some of them have replied and promised to join our cause. But this potions master rejected my invitation. She is now focusing on training her successor, so I need you to go over and see if you can persuade her. After all, you and I should both know how precious the top potions master is. I can try, but I need to know more about this potions master. Locke thought for a moment, nodded and agreed. I will leave as soon as possible. There is no need to be so anxious. Since you are back, you should at least pay more attention to your fiancé. The queen seemed to be very calm and said, every time you go out, Snow White often asks when you will be back. Especially since you brought back such a lovely witch this time. Don't make her angry. Should I not make Snow White angry, or should I not make you angry? Locke muttered to himself, looking at the queen who seemed to be simply concerned about her stepdaughter's feelings. He knew in his heart that before leaving, it was not just Snow White who needed to be comforted, but the queen in front of him as well. About 10 days later, Locke left the royal city and set out on his journey to visit the potions master. As he left, the queen looked noticeably better than when Locke had just returned, her face rosy and her skin seemingly nourished. On the way, Locke began to recall the information the queen had given him about the potions master. The potions master mostly stayed in his own potion garden, which was filled with various potion ingredients. The most unique plant in the garden was lettuce. The queen specifically warned Locke about a type of lettuce in the potions master's garden that could transform people. It looked like ordinary lettuce, but if eaten, it would transform them into a donkey. This type of transformation had no way of returning to human form except by consuming another companion lettuce in the garden. The potions master had used it to punish many people. Recently, the potions master seemed to have taken in the daughter of a couple from a village near the garden as his apprentice and was carefully training her. Locke took the queen's warning to heart, and he also recalled the fairy tale of Rapunzel. Locke wasn't surprised by the many princesses and beauties in fairy tales these days. He felt that the described Rapunzel, so beautiful, couldn't possibly surpass the queen and Snow White. He was more interested in the potions master's knowledge. If he could bring her back, he'd surely have the opportunity to learn from her in the future. Locke wasn't particularly interested in potions, but he could definitely bring Hermione with him next time he had the chance. He believed that with Hermione's talent, she had a good chance of impressing the potions master and teaching him everything he knew. Following the queen's directions, Locke headed towards the potions master's potion garden. However, while passing through a kingdom along the way, he heard of a remarkable story. The king of this kingdom had 3 daughters. One day, the 3 princesses suddenly disappeared. In search of his daughters, the king issued a notice: whoever finds the 3 princesses will marry one of them. This notice galvanized nearly every young man in the kingdom, scrambling to find the princesses. For them, this was an opportunity to soar to fame. Upon hearing this, Locke's first reaction was that this was probably another fairy tale. However, there were so many stories about finding a princess that Locke couldn't quite place it. He also considered whether to intervene. He didn't care about the princess, but rather that many fairy tales involve magical treasures. So, he decided to research the situation. If the story actually contained a valuable treasure, he couldn't miss it. With this thought in mind, Locke slightly deviated from his original route, preparing to head towards the kingdom's capital to investigate. Unexpectedly, just as he approached the capital, on the road to the capital, the golden compass he carried with him suddenly began to vibrate. This compass was something Locke had obtained from the Vatican. It was through this compass that the Vatican's officials had identified him as a wizard. The vibrations suggested the presence of a person or animal with a special bloodline nearby. He quickly took out a compass to confirm its location, only to discover that its needle pointed to 3 men dressed as hunters who had just passed by. After a moment's reflection, Locke didn't continue on to the royal city. Instead, he quietly followed the 3 men, eavesdropping on their conversation. It turned out the 3 men, dressed as hunters, were brothers, also driven by the king's command to search for the princess near the capital. The princess disappearance, coupled with the 3 hunters' special bloodline, felt like a fairy tale. Even if the 3 brothers weren't the main characters, they were certainly important figures. So, Locke cautiously followed the brothers, listening to their discussion of how to find the princess. Beyond that, there was nothing special. He also observed the brothers, observing them for any special abilities. After 2 days of observation, he found nothing remarkable, aside from their superior strength and agility. It seemed the brothers' bloodline had become quite diluted, which was not surprising. According to the Queen, the supernatural beings in fairy tales are generally related to the old gods, and their special abilities are inherited through bloodline. But over time, inherited power inevitably diminishes with each generation. Just like the old witch they encountered earlier, whose ancestor was also an extremely powerful wizard, she couldn't even open the secret chamber left behind by her ancestors. The same was likely true for the 3 brothers. Their bloodline had been diluted over generations, and now, only slightly stronger than an ordinary person, it was limited. After leaving the vicinity of the royal city, the 3 brothers entered the mountains and forests, believing that the bandits who had abducted the princess were likely hiding there. They toiled like this for several days until one day, after climbing a hill, they unexpectedly came upon a castle nestled deep in the mountains and forests. The castle, constructed of massive stones, lay hidden in the mountains, and it didn't look abandoned long ago, but rather newly built. However, when the 3 brothers arrived, they found the gates wide open, with no one guarding the gates. Locke used magic to sense the castle, but found no living creatures within. All this made the castle in front of him seem weird, and Locke finally thought of a fairy tale at this time. If he remembered correctly, the 3 princesses were in the basement of the castle, and the ones who kidnapped the princesses were not robbers, but 3 multi-headed dragons. Chapter 238 Dwarfs and Perception. Watching the 3 brothers hesitate before entering the castle together, Locke began to recall the fairy tale. According to the story, the 3 brothers decided to stay in the castle, using it as a base while 2 of them continued their search for the princess, leaving the last one behind. As they took turns guarding the castle, the eldest and second brother were assaulted by a dwarf who suddenly appeared. The 3rd brother, however, stood firm and beat the dwarf instead. To beg for mercy, the dwarf told him how the prince had been captured by 3 hydras and how they had been dealt with. He also warned him not to tell his 2 brothers, as they might harm him and take all the credit. Initially unconcerned, the 3rd brother told his 2 older brothers what had happened. He then used a basket to descend underground, slay 3 hydras, and rescue the princess. The 3rd brother then brought the princess back to the surface in the basket. When it was his turn, he remembered the dwarf's warning and opted for a large rock instead of the basket himself. As expected, the basket suddenly fell halfway, confirming the dwarf's warning. Later, the 3rd brother found a flute and summoned many dwarves. With these dwarves, he returned to the surface and found the king. The king executed his two brothers who had claimed credit for the victory and gave him the young princess in marriage. The story was simple, but Locke struggled to understand why the dragon had to abduct the princess. Or did it share human aesthetics and want to keep her for breeding? In the story, the dragon kept the princess to feed him lice, but Locke knew that with a dragon's might, no lice would be so bold as to crawl onto the dragon. They would be frightened to death before they even got close. Regardless of the dragon's power, the fleet that could summon and control the dwarves was quite interesting, and if these dwarves could be controlled, they would be very useful. As for the dragons, Locke had collected a number of dragon eggs from the Harry Potter world, which he still kept in a small suitcase. Without enough dragon trainers, the house elves he brought back couldn't manage the numerous other magical creatures and the taming of so many dragons. Locke was also quite interested in the dragons of the fairy tale world. According to the story, the 3 dragons in this story were multi-headed, with 9, 5, and 4 heads, respectively. It was hard to imagine, however, that the dragons, as depicted in the fairy tale, placed their heads on the princess's legs, asking them to pick lice. Could these princesses actually be giants? Fairy tales are bound to have some inconsistencies. After all, children's stories aren't always logically sound. Thinking this, Locke quietly followed the 3 brothers into the castle. The castle was quiet, deserted, yet spotlessly clean. After some discussion, the 3 brothers concluded that someone must be hiding. As for why, they supposedly had a hidden secret. Perhaps someone in the castle had kidnapped the princesses. Listening nearby, Locke couldn't help but grumble. He wondered how they came up with such an outrageous conclusion. He could only conclude that ordinary people in this world were simply too simple-minded. However, their assumption seemed to have been a blessing in disguise. With this conclusion, the 3 brothers began searching the castle, finding nothing. Meanwhile, Locke was also searching the castle. But not for the bandits who kidnapped the princess, but rather the dry well leading to the dragon. After a thorough search, Locke finally located the well. He cast several protective spells before descending through it with a flying spell. Initially, the well's passage was narrow, but gradually widened and deepened to a depth of at least 200 meters. Once Locke stepped back onto the ground, he found himself in a vast expanse, illuminated by torches. Locke raised a brow and looked down. Suddenly, several dusty, bearded, and classically styled dwarves emerged from the ground, staring menacingly at him. "Who are you, and why are you here?" These dwarves, armed with wooden clubs, surrounded Locke, emanating a unique aura that made him feel a sense of pressure. "Is this dragon might?" Locke, having seen dragons in the Harry Potter world, reflected carefully. The faint aura emanating from these dwarves seemed to be that of a dragon. But this dragon might wasn't strong, just enough for Locke to sense. "The 3 abducted princesses are here, right?" Although questioning, Locke's tone was firm. "Are you a fool tricked by the king into coming here to die?" a dwarf asked. "Looks like this is it. Petrify all." Locke cast his magic, instantly turning all the surrounding dwarves to stone, save for the one who had just spoken. Then, Locke cast a levitation spell, lifting the dwarf into the air. He had seen these dwarves emerge from the ground earlier, and he assumed they had some kind of burrowing ability. To prevent him from escaping, he used the levitation spell. "Alright, now I'll ask you a question. What's with that castle above ground?" Locke asked first. "Are you a wizard?" The dwarf found himself floating in midair. The other dwarves seemed frozen, unable to move, with expressions of surprise on their faces. He then sternly shouted, "Don't think that just because you're a wizard you can do whatever you want. If you don't escape quickly, the master is more powerful than you can imagine. He will tear you apart, master." "You're talking about the 3 hydras that kidnapped the princess, right?" Locke said slowly. "Actually, I have a question. Why did those 3 hydras kidnap the princess? This wizard isn't afraid of dragons." The dwarf looked at Locke, his expression filled with surprise and doubt. "Answer my question," Locke said impatiently, adding a hint of mental pressure. "I don't know why the master abducted the princess. I only know they've been sleeping underground in the king's back garden. They woke up a while ago, took the princess away, and then had us build a castle here." "Did you build this castle?" "I remember it was only 15 days since the princess was abducted." "How could you guys build a castle so quickly?" "We can manipulate the power of the earth to form stones. And we're not just a few, we're thousands." Under Locke's pressure, the dwarf seemed quite obedient. Clearly, these dwarves are magical creatures, their innate abilities making them skilled builders. They'd built a fully fledged castle in just 2 weeks. Thinking of the magic academy he was planning, Locke thought he could bring these dwarves back to work as laborers. This would not only save a lot of manpower but also save time. Roar! Just as Locke was contemplating this, a dragon roared from the depths of the cave, causing the dwarf's expression to suddenly change. "The master has returned, and he will definitely kill you," the dwarf shouted loudly. At the same time, a nearly 20-meter-long, gray-white dragon with 5 heads appeared in front of Locke with heavy footsteps. When Locke spotted it, the dragon also saw Locke. It spread its wings, and its 5 heads roared, breathing fire at Locke. Chapter 239 Contract. In the blink of an eye, the flames traversed over 30 meters and reached Locke. But about a meter from Locke, they seemed to encounter an invisible barrier, exploding with a bang before losing their power. Locke glanced around and pointed. The scattered boulders quickly gathered together. Then, with a transfiguration spell, they transformed into a 6 to 7 meter tall, armored warrior statue. He didn't pause. Another statue of the same size appeared. Then, as Locke chanted an incantation, the 2 massive statues raised their shields and one-handed hammers with a clanging sound. Grow larger. Turn stone into steel. Knowing that a simple stone statue wouldn't be able to withstand the dragon, Locke quickly cast another spell, strengthening the 2 statues. As the spell took effect, the statues, originally only 6 or 7 meters tall, began to grow, growing until they reached 15 or 16 meters before stopping. Simultaneously, the 2 stone statues began to change color, their stone texture disappearing, transforming into shimmering metal. Looking at the 2 metal giants, Locke nodded inwardly. At his command, the 2 giants, shields raised in their left hands and hammers in their right, took off, their strides shaking the ground as they charged towards the 5-headed dragon. Perhaps overly proud of the provocation, the dragon didn't bother to target Locke, the spellcaster, but instead spread its wings and charged towards the 2 giants. Clang! With a resounding crash, the dragon knocked the leading giant to the ground. Then, its 5 heads attacked and began to bite the giant. Beasts are beasts, even with their immense strength. Watching the dragon's 5 heads tear through the giant's body and shield, Locke remained unfazed. Another giant charged forward, brandishing its massive shield and smashing into the largest of the 5 dragons, sending its neck careening sideways. Meanwhile, the fallen giant released its weapon and grabbed the dragons, rolling them over and pinning them down. Roar! The 5 dragons roared and struggled. Their immense force sent the metal giant tumbling across the ground, sending surrounding boulders flying. But with the arrival of another metal giant, the dragons were immediately at a disadvantage. After a period of struggle and tumbling, they were finally pinned to the ground by the combined force of the 2 giants. Unable to move under the immense force, they could only roar incessantly, their 5 heads biting the 2 giants, leaving deep tooth marks on their flesh. Only then did Locke calmly approach, as the stunned dwarves nearby stared. But at that moment, the dragons suddenly released their jaws from the metal giants and lunged towards Locke. In an instant, 5 jets of flame erupted at Locke. The 2 were now only a dozen meters apart, and the flames reached Locke in an instant. As if prepared, Locke raised his hand, pointing at the flames charging towards him, muttering a spell. The next moment, the flames that threatened to engulf him seemed to be drawn in, rapidly shrinking and converging at Locke's fingertips. As the dragon's flames ceased, a white-hot fireball appeared at his fingertips. With a flip of his hand, it hovered above his palm. Impossible, the dwarf next to him hadn't noticed he'd fallen to the ground, his mouth hanging open as he stared at the scene before him. He wondered if his eyes had failed him, witnessing such an incredible illusion. With a faint smile, Locke made a fist, and the fireball in his palm instantly extinguished, with only a few sparks scattering. The next moment, Locke extended his hand and pointed, and the hammer that the metal giant had dropped to the ground suddenly levitated. Then, swung by an invisible force, it descended directly towards the 5 dragons. Bang, 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 bang. With each powerful blow, the dragon's 5 heads were targeted. Blood flowed from the shattered scales on its forehead, and the pupils of each of its 5 heads were rolled back. If it weren't for the fact that its body was still rising and falling with its breathing, one would have thought it was dead. The dwarf's eyes widened in disbelief, and only when the hammer in midair landed on the ground with a loud clang did his mind finally come to its senses. Most wizards in fairy tales are actually quite weak, similar to the old witch Locke had encountered before. Those as powerful as the queen are few and far between. The dwarf found it hard to believe that Locke could dispatch 5 dragons so easily, and with such brutal force. Slowly approaching the dragon, Locke continued to chant the spell. Golden runes appeared on the dragon's forehead and slowly imprinted themselves on it. This time, he used contract magic, also acquired from the old witch. It could forcibly bind and control magical creatures. For example, the 3 hounds were the old witch's ancestors' contracted creatures, later transformed by alchemy. Sure enough, dragons are quite resistant to magic. Choosing physical methods just now was the right choice. Feeling the resistance from the magic, the golden rune began to vibrate. Locke increased his magic power, and the golden light on the rune grew brighter. After a moment, the golden rune was finally fully imprinted on the forehead of the largest of the 5 dragons, slowly fading away. Only then did Locke feel slightly relieved and said to the dragon, "Don't play dead. Answer my question first. Where are the other 2 dragons? My 2 brothers are out. They won't be back until tonight." A deep sense of resentment flashed in the 5 dragons' eyes, but they still answered Locke's question obediently. Heart-wrenching, Locke suddenly growled. "Roar!" The dragon roared in pain. A moment later, Locke shelved his spell and spoke slowly. "They're so dishonest. You clearly sent them a message using mystical magic just now. They'll be back soon." Locke had learned this by using divine sense. Previously, due to its powerful magic resistance, Locke's divine sense had been ineffective, but after the contract was signed, the situation was completely different. The dragon's dishonesty indicated that the contract's binding power wasn't very strong, and it still had many flaws. This made Locke consider killing the 5 dragons outright and turning them into magical materials. However, compared to a one-time, one-shot plan, sustainable development was the best path. Chapter 240. It's a monster indeed. After a moment's thought, Locke finally produced a crystal ball. After chanting a spell, the queen's face appeared within. Perhaps taking a nap, the queen's face wore a slightly languid expression. Seeing Locke, she greeted him. "Why are you contacting me so soon, my little cutie?" Her lips twitched. Locke thought to himself, "You said it was too big before, but now it's just a little cutie. It must be that you're not in front of me right now, otherwise I'd definitely make you reconsider your size. I just encountered something on the road." Locke outlined the situation, then pointed at the 5-headed dragon and said, "Do you think I should skin and cramp this dishonest dragon, or keep it?" Roar! At Locke's mention of skinning and cramping, the 5 dragons couldn't help but struggle. Then, pinned down by the 2 metal giants, and with Locke's magical power activating the contract, they were reduced to screams. 5 giant dragons. The queen looked in the direction Locke pointed, and a look of joy suddenly appeared on her face. "I didn't expect that the bloodline of this poisonous dragon has been passed down. I thought it had been killed by the Lord of Savior." The bloodline of the poisonous dragon, are they related to the Lord of Savior? Locke immediately became interested. The bloodline of this multi-headed dragon is also not simple. Legend has it that it is the descendant of a 100-headed poisonous dragon born to Forces, the father of all monsters, and Keto, the daughter of the earth. The queen slowly recounted the origins of the 5 dragons. Hundreds of years ago, they wreaked havoc on this land. Legend has it that they encountered the holy incarnation of the Lord of Holy Light, who walked the world and were eventually killed. Now it seems that they may have only suffered heavy losses, so they have gone into hiding. Haha, these people in the church are really good at bragging. The queen never forgot to mock the church. However, Locke did not have so much time at this time, so he said, "The trouble now is that its 2 brothers will be back soon. Do you think I should kill them now to eliminate some hidden dangers first?" "No need. The strength of these 3 multi-headed dragons is still very good. If they can be tamed, they will be a great help. You just said that you have already cast the slavery contract." "Indeed, this is the contract I obtained from an old witch during my previous adventure. It just doesn't seem to be working. It even sent a message behind my back just now." Locke made no secret and shared the enslavement contract with the queen. "The old witch who taught you this enslavement contract must be of the moon god bloodline. The contract is fine, but you are not of the moon god bloodline, so you can't fully utilize its effects. Plus, the multi-headed dragon is inherently resistant to magic, so it's impossible to make it obey my orders. As for the other 2 multi-headed dragons, don't worry. I'll be there soon." As Locke spoke, a surge of magical energy reached his side, and the next moment, the queen, dressed in her court attire, appeared beside him. The queen had used a sapparot, a spell Locke had taught her. With Locke as a coordinate, the queen's strength made covering hundreds of miles a breeze. After glancing at the dragon subdued by the two metal giants, the queen turned her gaze to Locke, smiling as she sized him up before saying, "My earlier perception was correct. I wonder which old god's bloodline you are descended from. Your strength has grown so rapidly, otherwise you wouldn't have been able to defeat the 5 dragons before us. This is all thanks to the care you take care of, Her Majesty." Locke smiled, emphasizing the word care, causing the queen to blush slightly. She then took a step forward and approached Locke, a familiar aroma instantly filing his nose. The queen was slightly shorter than Locke, and she raised her head slightly to whisper in his ear, "Now that you know, you'll have to work even harder from now on. You're truly a demon." Unable to resist a slight salute, Locke put his arm around the queen's waist and said, "So, should we wait for the 2 multi-headed dragons to arrive?" "Of course. If I don't come, the 4-headed dragon is fine, but the 9-headed dragon is. You may not be a match for it." "Oh?" Locke raised an eyebrow. "Does having more heads mean it's more powerful?" "Indeed," the queen said. "The more heads a multi-headed dragon has, the stronger it is. This 5-headed dragon before you can only use some ordinary dragon breath, which is why you easily subdued it. But the 9-headed dragon should be proficient in multiple magics and much more difficult to deal with than this foolish giant. Otherwise, it wouldn't have needed the holy avatar of the Lord of Holy Light to personally attack it hundreds of years ago and would have escaped. Even now, their injuries haven't fully healed. I'll take care of the 9-headed dragon. As for your enslavement magic," the queen glanced at the 5-headed dragon and said, "When we get back, I'll find a way to help you improve it. I think you'll be able to completely control the multi-headed dragon." As expected, the queen must intervene, Locke said with a smile, complimenting her, brightening the queen's smile. "You are the Black Witch Queen." Just then, a fearful voice echoed from the side. It was the dwarf who had been standing nearby. "It is indeed the Entius dwarfs." The queen turned her attention to the dwarves. "Blessed by Gaia, the Earth Mother, your harvest on this trip is truly beyond our wildest dreams. You are truly a lucky star." Gently kissing Locke on the cheek, the queen approached the dwarves, examining them as if they were merchandise. The dwarf was already trembling. The queen's fame was evident, and the dwarf hadn't expected a wizard who suddenly appeared to be related to the Black Witch Queen. He had originally thought that if Locke engaged a multi-headed dragon, he and his people would have a chance to escape its control. But now, it seemed like they had just escaped a wolf's den and entered a tiger's den. Roar! At that moment, accompanied by a mighty roar, Locke and the queen felt a powerful, oppressive aura bearing down on them, a surge of fear rising within them. This dragon's might is significantly stronger than the 5-headed dragon, and it's coming on quite quickly, Locke thought, looking towards the direction of the dragon's might. 2 multi-headed dragons had already appeared in the cavern below, with a subdued 5-headed dragon nestled between them. With a thud, Locke's 2 metal giants began to drag the 5-headed dragon aside, clearing the battlefield. Seeing their brothers being dragged like dead dogs by 2 metal statues, they flew into a rage, their maws opened wide, and several heads simultaneously spewed out dragon breath. 4 of the dragons breathed fire, while the 9-headed dragon, in addition to flames, also released a vast cloud of dark green poisonous mist, all aimed at Locke and the queen beside him. Chapter 241 Float. Converge the flames. Locke cast a divine fire spell, and the flames hurled at the 2 men transformed into a brilliant, incandescent fireball just a short distance from the 2 multi-headed dragons. Then, with a wave of his hand, the basin-sized fireball smashed into the head of the largest of the 4 dragons, stunning them. Magic resistance is indeed strong. Seeing the 4 dragons, only their heads were slightly charred and a few scales had fallen off, Locke frowned slightly, debating whether to mobilize the 2 metal giants who had just dragged the 5 dragons aside to help. At that moment, the queen waved her hand, dispelling the poisonous mist emanating from the 9-headed dragon. She smiled softly, her magical energy surging, and even a faint blue hue could be seen. "This magic power is at least 10 times greater than mine currently. Even in a fairy tale world, it's beyond the pale. No wonder the church is so cautious." As Locke pondered this, he saw a fierce torrent of magic erupt from the queen, gushing towards the 9-headed dragon. Boom! A detonation like high explosives echoed underground. Caught off guard, Locke quickly cast a silencing spell and rubbed his still ringing ears. The 9-headed dragon didn't even utter a wail. Its massive body collapsed to the ground, scales flying, and a massive wound appeared on its body. If it weren't for the dragon's immense vitality, it would have been completely dead. With a long sigh, the queen looked back at Locke. I'll leave the four-headed dragon to you, no problem, Locke smiled, thinking it would be great to have strong thugs. Then, the two metal giants swarmed the four-headed dragon. Bang, 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 with a flurry of blows and the roars and wails of the four dragons, the two metal giants succeeded in bringing it down to the footsteps of the five-headed dragon. The queen thought for a moment and said, leave this nine-headed dragon to me, and you'll handle the other two. Use the slavery contract first, and I'll improve it when I return and renew it. Okay, Locke nodded, and together with the queen, they forcibly bound the two dragons. Then Locke turned to the dwarves. The dwarves, seeing the three dragons that had enslaved their tribe had been captured, felt anything but joy. Now they had to face the renowned Dark Witch Queen and an unknown and powerful wizard. Locke didn't care what the dwarf thought and simply ordered, take us to the three dragons' abode. He hadn't forgotten that the flute that could control the dwarves must be hidden there, otherwise, the third brother in the fairy tale wouldn't have been able to command the dwarves' help in escaping the cave. These dwarves numbered in the hundreds, perhaps even thousands, and were skilled builders. They could construct a brand new castle in just a dozen days. They must be firmly under their control. Beyond just construction, these dwarves, possessing the legendary bloodline of the Sons of Earth, our spirits of the land, adept at using earth-related magic. While their power may not be particularly strong, they can easily defeat ordinary individuals, even ordinary knights of the church. Coupled with their elusive nature, they are perfect for scouting, assassinations, and creating chaos. Used effectively, they are forced to be reckoned with. This formidable force must be mastered. The dwarf smiled wryly. The three-headed dragon's miserable appearance was before his eyes. Unwilling to disobey Locke's orders, he obediently led Locke and the queen through the long corridor to the three stone chambers. Locke first entered the chamber containing the nine-headed dragon. After a careful search, he soon discovered an emerald green flute engraved with ochre patterns, forming the image of a giant's feet stepping on the earth. Sensing the flute shimmering, obscure magical energy, Locke looked at the dwarf. Tell me what this flute does, and how do I use it? The dwarf's face showed an emerald look, and he turned his head away, remaining silent. HMPH, the queen beside him snorted, her gaze sweeping over the dwarf. The dwarf shuddered, hesitated for a moment, and finally gritted his teeth and said, just use your magic to play. If you don't accept my toast, you'll have to drink for it. Locke sneered, bringing the flute to his lips and trying to play. As the flute rang out, Locke felt magic flow into it. Simultaneously, the patterns on the flute glowed slightly, and gradually, the giant image on the flute became more lifelike, transforming into a towering giant. Simultaneously, as the flute sounded, several dwarves suddenly emerged from the ground. As the music continued, they emerged one by one, their faces showing reluctance. The dwarves gathered densely. Locke took a quick glance and saw at least hundreds of them. As for the thousands the dwarf had mentioned, it was probably even less than that. The dwarf who had initially led the way also wore a bitter expression. They had always dreamed of escaping the control of the nine-headed dragon, but now they had fallen into the hands of the even more terrifying Black Witch Queen, ultimately still controlled and deprived of their freedom. Locke naturally noticed the dwarves' reluctance, but neither he nor the queen cared much. He was now happy about their current harvest. Are the three princesses captured by the multi-headed dragon still here? Locke asked directly, recalling the fairy tale to make sure nothing was forgotten. They're in the next room, the dwarf replied. Go notify the three men in the castle above and have them rescue the princesses. Locke thought about it and realized he couldn't just leave the three princesses there to fend for themselves, so he pointed at a dwarf and gave an order. Wait a moment. Just as he finished his order, Locke suddenly thought of something and said to the queen, there are three people outside in the castle. They seem to have some special bloodline, but I can't tell. Special bloodline? The queen's interest peaked. To fight the church, she and Locke were both seeking ways to develop the kingdom and recruit individuals with special abilities. The three brothers' current strength was merely that of ordinary knights, yet the third brother, as in fairy tales, was able to slay three dragons. Locke suspected they likely possessed some special bloodline that could counter dragons. I'll go and take a look, the queen said. If they're truly useful, I'll take them back. Nodding, Locke continued, I'll probably go back too, taking the dragons and these dwarves with me. After I've made arrangements, I'll continue my visit to the potions master. The queen nodded. The three dragons and these dwarves would be of great benefit to both of their future plans. The dwarves could accelerate the kingdom's development, and the dragons could become a crucial weapon against the church. They absolutely had to be taken back and properly placed. As for the three princesses, Locke simply ordered the dwarves to transport them to a nearby town. Whether or not the lucky warrior found them was no longer a concern for Locke. Finally, Locke handed the flute that controlled the dwarves to Fleur, placing her in charge of the dwarves and instructing her to carefully guard it and be vigilant against any unauthorized actions. The dwarves couldn't disobey the flute's owner, but such control was coercive, so they were bound to slack off or even try to break free. Therefore, there was no hope of their true obedience anytime soon. As for the dragons, the queen found a place deep in the mountains near the royal capital for them to stay, enforcing various spells to prevent their escape. As for the three brothers, the queen examined them and discovered that they possessed the rare bloodline of a dragon slayer, so she assigned them to the army. Once everything was in place, Locke set out again for the potions master's botanical garden. Chapter 242 How long can you snoring? Journeying through a dense forest, Locke watched the smoke rising from a nearby village, convinced that they were finally nearing their destination. The village ahead was the one next to the potion garden where the potions master sat. With this thought in mind, Locke shifted his gaze to the road and spotted a dark-skinned, middle-aged man not far ahead, carrying a basket and singing an unidentified folk song. "Wait a moment," Locke called out to him. "Who are you?" Seeing the sudden appearance of a stranger, the middle-aged man frowned, a look of alarm on his face. Their village was very remote, and outsiders rarely appeared. "My name is Locke, and I want to ask you something." As he spoke, a silver coin appeared at Locke's fingertips. "If your answer satisfies me, it's yours." Seeing the silver coin in Locke's hand, the middle-aged man's eyes lit up, and he said with a smile, "Ask whatever you want, but don't delay too long. I need to deliver food." He glanced at the villager's basket. Most of it was covered with cloth, but perhaps due to carelessness, a corner was exposed, revealing white bread and a bottle of wine. He frowned slightly. This didn't make sense at all. The fairy tale world was generally based on the European Middle Ages. The middle-aged man's skin and calluses on his hands told him he was a peasant. He had never heard of any ordinary villager being able to afford white bread and wine. Even with this in mind, Locke asked, "Do you know of a place nearby where many magical plants grow? Who are you, and why are you asking about this?" Locke's question immediately alerted the man. "I'm a friend of the master, and I've come here specifically to visit her." "Impossible. I've lived here for over a decade, and I've never heard of anyone visiting that great figure." "How could you?" The middle-aged man was halfway through his words when he was drawn to the gold coin in Locke's hand. "All you have to do is lead me to the master's potion garden. You don't have to do anything else, and it's yours," Locke said slowly. The middle-aged man swallowed, hesitated for a moment, then gritted his teeth and took the gold coin from Locke's hand. Locke then followed the middle-aged man all the way into the forest, where he pulled a green ring from his bosom. Raising an eyebrow slightly, he was certain the man was a completely ordinary person, but Locke sensed a surge of magical energy from the ring. Locke could sense him, guided by the ring, passing through a barrier. Following him, Locke also passed through the barrier and noticed the scene before him suddenly changed. Amidst the previously densely wooded forest, a vast expanse of space emerged. At its center stood a tall stone tower. It had no stairs or doors, only a single window visible at the very top. The surrounding land was planted with a variety of plants, and Locke knew this must be the potion garden. "Sure enough, this villager is bringing food to the potions master," Locke thought to himself, watching as the villager placed the food basket beneath the tower. "I don't know if you're kidding me, but if you do anything untoward, that great man will surely teach you a lesson." With that, the middle-aged man hurried away, and Locke stood there, watching him thoughtfully. If nothing goes wrong, he must be Rapunzel's father. The Rapunzel fairy tale is quite famous, telling the story of a villager whose wife, driven by her greed, repeatedly steals Rapunzel's lettuce. The witch eventually catches them, and she promises to let them go only if they hand over their unborn daughter to her. The couple reluctantly agreed. The witch fed the villagers' wives lettuce daily and, after their daughter was born, took the girl away, forcing her to live high up in the tower. Later, a prince stumbled upon Rapunzel and became fascinated with her. Once, he saw the witch asking Rapunzel to let her hair down and climb up to his tower. He then used the same method to meet Rapunzel, and the two quickly fell in love. Upon discovering this, the witch dumped Rapunzel in the deserted wilderness. Heartbroken, the prince leaped from the tower, blinding himself. Years later, the wandering prince reunited with Rapunzel in the wilderness. Rapunzel's tears healed the prince, and the two lived happily ever after. Considering what the queen had told Locke, it's clear that the potion's master considered Rapunzel his heir, yet Rapunzel was seduced by the prince. Locke felt that the potion's master was kind enough not to kill the prince outright. After all, in this era, disciples were truly like children, and the prince's seduction of Rapunzel effectively ended the potion's master's legacy. Locke waited for a while at the foot of the tower, and finally saw an old woman wearing a pointed hat and a dark green robe appear before him. "Who are you?" "Hello, potion's master, I was sent by the queen to deliver a letter to you." Locke saluted and took out the queen's letter. "The dark witch queen," the potion's master frowned and said, "didn't I already reject your invitation? I have no interest in being a teacher at a magic school. I want to live a few more years in my old age, but I don't want to attract the attention of the church. Master, I think you'd better take a look at the queen's letter." Locke said slowly, "Master, do you think that as long as we don't provoke the church, they won't come to us?" "So, how many of the old god bloodlines that have been eliminated by the church so far were actually those who actively provoked the church?" The potion's master remained silent and did not answer. She knew what Locke meant. Most of the time, it was not the old god bloodlines that wanted to cause trouble, but the church itself that was constantly hunting down the old god bloodlines. If the information I received when I arrived is correct, the Vatican's influence in this country has grown rapidly in recent years. Now the king and most of the nobles have embraced the Lord of Light. "Do you think the Vatican will continue to coexist peacefully with you?" Locke said slowly. "I've heard the saying, 'I won't allow others to snore beside my bed.' I wonder how much longer the Vatican will allow you, master, to snore here." These words cut straight to the heart, like a sharp sword, causing the potion's master, who had always been reluctant to consider such matters, to feel a sinking feeling in her heart. She wanted to avoid trouble and live a quiet life, but how long could such a peaceful life last? Chapter 243. As long as there is an effect, it will be fine. Locke's words were very nice, but it is not so easy to break people's habitual thinking. Even though he knew in his heart that with the rapid development of the Holy See in her kingdom, it would not allow her to continue to stay here comfortably, the potion master could not make up his mind for a while. Seeing that the potion master seemed to be hesitating, Locke said, "I hope you will carefully consider the Queen's invitation. Only under the protection of a powerful force can people like us live in peace. I know everything you said. Let me think it over." The potion master raised his eyes and glanced at Locke, and replied slowly, "Are you still going to force me to make a decision?" Locke wanted to continue persuading him, but the potion master looked like he didn't want to talk about it anymore, so Locke had to change the subject and said, "Of course not. I just saw a lot of novel potion materials here, and I want to ask the master for more knowledge about potions. For this, I am willing to exchange some novel potion formulas, as well as practical spells such as self-defense and flying. I wonder if the master is willing to teach me." "Huh? What potion formula do you have that I don't know?" "If you want to stay, you can stay, but you can't live with me, and you can't touch anything in the potion garden, otherwise the consequences will be unbearable." The potion's master didn't refuse Locke's invitation to stay. He knew Locke was trying more to persuade him. While she had declined the Queen's invitation, she didn't want to completely offend her. Furthermore, Locke's words had indeed enlightened her. The Vatican had grown rapidly in her kingdom in recent years. If the Vatican truly wanted to take action against her, while she wouldn't be completely powerless, her chances of success were slim. After all, her specialty was potion making, not combat. The Vatican was numerous and their forces were constantly pouring in. Even if she could hold off for a while with her potion garden, she couldn't guarantee her safety forever. Therefore, she needed some time to carefully consider whether to agree to the Dark Witch Queen's request. As for the potion formula Locke had mentioned, she didn't believe Locke had any special formula. Seeing the potion's master's agreement to stay and consult, Locke prepared to settle down in nearby. The village not far from the potion garden was the best choice. Leaving the potion garden, Locke was surprised to see the middle-aged man who had delivered the food. He looked over cautiously, observing something. Seeing Locke emerge, he ran over and said, "Thank goodness you didn't anger that important person. I told you, the master is my friend. I came here specifically to visit." Locke suspected the man was worried he'd angered the potion's master. If the potion's master knew he'd led the way, he might even be punished. He dismissed the man's whimsical thoughts and said to the middle-aged man, "I'm going to stay here for a while. Do you have any spare rooms?" "Ah, of course I do, but..." The middle-aged man hesitated, glancing toward the potion garden. "Don't worry, I'll pay the rent," Locke said, holding out another gold coin. He accepted the money, but the middle-aged man was still thinking to himself, someone who could enter the potions master's potion garden without facing any punishment and live safely in the village must be a powerful figure to be reckoned with. He acted even more cautiously. This wasn't too surprising to Locke. The middle-aged man's family was considered wealthy in the village. After all, they earned extra money by constantly sending food to the potions master, so the couple lived quite comfortably. Following the man's prediction, they cleared out the best room in their house and gave it to Locke to live in. They also prepared his daily meals, and thus, Locke settled down temporarily in the village. This Felixir potion is indeed very interesting. It can directly change a person's personality, making them more positive and confident. "I wonder where you got so many potion recipes from." The potions master's knowledge was inherited. Her potion-making skills were highly advanced, even surpassing many potion masters in the Harry Potter world. She even had many unique methods, truly demonstrating her profound skills. However, her vast knowledge of potions, in some areas, could not compare to the vast knowledge developed by the entire Harry Potter world over the years. After all, how could one person's closed-door work compare to the widespread knowledge shared and studied by generations of people? However, the potions master possessed numerous potion ingredients Locke had never encountered before, including numerous unique potions he had never encountered before, such as potions that could directly enhance mental strength. There was also a method that could innate magical talent in a person from birth. Consider the village couple, both ordinary people, yet their daughter possessed magical talent. This completely defied the laws of fairy tales, where bloodlines are crucial. The real reason was that the potions master had fed his wife a large amount of special lettuce during her pregnancy, which gave Rapunzel magical talent and also gave her the name Rapunzel. Because of this, Locke wondered if the potions master's lettuce would work on children in their mother's wombs, and wondered if it would work on adults. If so, that would be fantastic news. Meditation, while accessible to ordinary people, was also limited by aptitude. For example, Ashley's meditation skills weren't even 1/10 as fast as Peggy's. Locke estimated that after years of diligent meditation, perhaps only a few minor spells could be mastered. Because of this, the full life-extending effects of meditation couldn't be fully realized. At most, it could only extend one's life by a few decades, maintaining eternal youth, a far cry from immortality. However, when Locke questioned the potions master about this, he received a less than optimistic response. The lettuce that enhances magical aptitude is specially cultivated, requiring vast resources and a considerable amount of time to cultivate. Its effectiveness on those over 10 years old is less than 10%. If given to adults, it would be completely ineffective. This was the potions master's response to Locke's question. Locke was somewhat disappointed, but he didn't give up completely. After all, even if the effect was weak, it was enough. If it wasn't enough, he could always make up for it with quantity. Ashley wasn't just about her looks and figure, she truly devoted her entire heart to Locke, caring only for him. Given the opportunity, Locke would certainly not treat her unfairly. As for the time and resources required to cultivate the lettuce, for Locke, who could constantly travel through time, he could always find a way to obtain it. So, Locke specifically asked the potions master for advice on how to cultivate this lettuce and even obtained some seeds from her, intending to cultivate it himself. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 244 I Must Save Her. While staying with the potions master, Locke naturally met Rapunzel. She was truly stunningly beautiful, and her singing voice was captivating, even moving. No wonder the prince was drawn to her. Speaking of the prince, Locke estimated that, given Rapunzel's age, it wouldn't be long before the prince arrived. After spending over a month here, Locke hadn't seen the potions master make up his mind. He thought he could use the prince to persuade the potions master to move. While he pondered this, he used his potion knowledge from the Harry Potter world to exchange lessons with the potions master. More than a month passed, and finally, the prince he had long awaited appeared. The prince arrived with a few guards, having come to this remote village solely for hunting. Upon hearing the prince's arrival, the entire village gathered at the village entrance to kneel and greet him, while Locke quietly observed from a distance. He immediately spotted the prince, mounted on a brown horse. He had a handsome face, a high nose, and thin lips, reminiscent of a young Leonardo DiCaprio. No wonder he charmed Rapunzel. The prince glanced at the gathered villagers, a subtle frown etched in his eye, as if disapproving of their appearance and attire. Without another word, he turned his horse around, intending to go hunting in the forest. Seeing this, the prince's guards hurried after him, ignoring the villagers kneeling in a circle. They waited until the prince and his guards were far away before they dared to stand up. Quietly following the prince, they watched him spot a wild deer and chase it until they approached the potions garden's tower. Locke was certain this prince was the fairy tale prince. When they were not far from the tower, the deer, taking advantage of the forest barrier, disappeared from the prince's sight. He searched the surroundings but found nothing, feeling a sense of disappointment. At this moment, the prince also noticed his guards were absent, and he couldn't help but feel annoyed. He whipped a nearby tree with his whip a few times, and suddenly heard an ethereal singing voice. Locke knew it was Rapunzel singing. Although the potions master had been kind to Rapunzel, he had kept her confined to her room in the tower, leaving her completely ignorant of the world and feeling lonely. Therefore, Rapunzel would sing every day to relieve her loneliness. Her voice was so moving that the prince was drawn to it. He listened carefully for a moment and couldn't help but search for the source of the sound. Following the direction of the sound, he crossed the illusion and turned his gaze to the tower, where he saw Rapunzel singing by the window. In an instant, the prince was captivated by Rapunzel's beauty. He stood there, stunned, watching Rapunzel sing softly. Only when Rapunzel stopped singing and left the window did the prince come to his senses and began to search along the base of the tower for the entrance. However, the tower had no gate or stairs. In desperation, he shouted loudly again, trying to attract Rapunzel's attention. But there was no response. After shouting for a while, the prince had no choice but to stop and return with the guards who were attracted by his shouts. But after returning, the prince was always obsessed with Rapunzel's beauty and singing, so he stayed there. Every day, he rode alone to the tower, hid outside the wall, and listened to Rapunzel's singing. But doing so made him want to see Rapunzel even more. Until one day, he saw the potion master coming to the bottom of the tower. The potion master's dress reminded the prince of the evil witches promoted by the Vatican. Legend has it that these witches are messengers of the devil from hell, doing all kinds of evil. They would cast evil magic to devour people's souls, and they also like to dig out human hearts to make soup and create terrible and evil potions. Hiding in the shadows, the prince quietly observed the potions master. She reached the base of the tower and called out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let your hair down." The next moment, a brilliant golden hair descended from the small window above the tower, landing before the potions master. Once the master secured the hair, it gently wrapped around her and pulled her to the top of the tower. The prince was startled by this miraculous sight, but then he realized that if the old witch could enter the tower this way, then he should be able to do the same, and then he could see the beautiful girl. With this thought, the prince looked toward the tower. No matter how difficult it is, no matter the cost, I must see you. Locke, standing nearby, watched the prince, whose obsession had grown almost obsessive. He smiled softly, raised his head, and turned his gaze toward the tower. This time, the prince didn't leave like he had done the previous times. Instead, he patiently waited until the potions master left. Then, somewhat impatiently, he reached the base of the tower and, imitating the potions master's cry, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let your hair down." Rapunzel, high in the tower, was about to let her hair down when a voice suddenly called out, "If I were you, I'd first check who's calling that." Rapunzel was startled by the sudden appearance beside her. Turning, she recognized Locke and felt relieved. "It's you, Mr. Locke." She knew Locke. He claimed to be a friend of her godmother's. He had been visiting her frequently lately, giving her many novel gifts and books. He seemed kind and gentle. However, her godmother seemed wary of Locke and rarely allowed her to see him. Locke spent most of his time studying potions with her godmother, so their interactions were limited. At this moment, the prince's voice echoed from below. Rapunzel hesitated for a moment and said, "Mr. Locke, who's that?" She could tell it wasn't the potions master calling her, but she had lived in the potions garden since she was a child and had never seen anyone besides him. Besides studying potions, she spent her time reading. She was utterly lonely, so even though she knew it was a stranger, she wanted to meet him, hoping to bring some color to her monotonous life. A prince with ulterior motives. He's noticed your beauty and is plotting against you, Locke explained simply. If you don't want to anger your godmother, it's best not to bother with him. Rapunzel didn't quite believe Locke's words. In her innocence, she believed the world was a beautiful place, especially since she had read books about princes who were always upright and kind. However, she knew that since Locke already knew, he would most likely tell her godmother. If she actually dragged the prince up, her godmother would undoubtedly be furious. So Rapunzel could only nod and say, I understand. I won't make my godmother angry. That would be great. Actually, I have good news. I'm planning to invite the potions master to teach at my school, and she'll definitely take you with her. You'll be able to make a lot of friends there, and you won't have to stay in your tower room all day like you do now. Really? Rapunzel's eyes lit up at this, and she couldn't help but ask. Of course, Locke understood Rapunzel's feelings and smiled, saying, my fiancée, Snow White, will also be studying there. I'm sure you two will become good friends. Attracted by Locke's words, Rapunzel ignored the prince's cries from below and instead began to ask Locke about school. The prince, after calling for a long time, saw no sign of his long golden hair falling. He was filled with disappointment, and his thoughts began to wander. Why didn't the beautiful girl let her long hair down? Is she afraid of the old witch? Is she imprisoned by the old witch? Because of the propaganda at the church, the prince quickly began to think in this direction. It must be so. The beautiful girl was captured by the old witch and imprisoned in the temple. I must rescue her. Chapter 245, Pretty Boy Locke. Thinking of the beautiful girl imprisoned and tortured by the wicked old witch, the prince could no longer sit still. He had to save her and prevent her from falling into her clutches. A strong sense of justice surged within the prince, but the thought of the old witch also filled him with fear. Legend has it that these witches possessed extremely powerful and evil spells, and a mere mortal like him was no match for them. How could he possibly save the poor, tortured girl? Call my guards to help me kill that old witch, but I've heard that the spells of these evil sorcerers are no match for even the bravest warriors, and the ones who came with me were just ordinary guards. The prince pondered, ordinary people are powerless against evil sorcerers. Only the priests of the church have the means to deal with them. He quickly recalled stories he'd heard in the church. In those stories, evil sorcerers and demons were slain by the church's warriors and priests. He decided he should seek the church's help. Thinking of this, the prince no longer waited and quickly left. He had to return to the royal city and find Bishop Lance, who surely had a way to destroy the old witch. Having finished his imagination, the prince hurried away. Meanwhile, Locke talked to Rapunzel about school and Snow White, then found the potions master and told him about the prince's appearance. That's the handsome prince who recently came to the village. Did he see Rapunzel? The potions master couldn't help but frown. The potions master was only proficient in potion making, not combat, and wasn't particularly alert, so he hadn't noticed the prince earlier. Now, hearing Locke's words, he couldn't help but frown. The prince had been in the village for several days, and the potions master had heard of him. He was the king's youngest son, and because of his striking good looks, he was known as the beautiful prince by many, and the sweetheart of many noble women. The potions master hadn't expected him to discover the potion garden, and upon seeing Rapunzel, he seemed to be interested in her. But she would never agree for the two of them to be together. Rapunzel was her heir and her lifeblood, and she would not allow anyone to have any ideas about her. Where is the prince now? Asked the potions master. I persuaded Rapunzel at the time, and she did not see the prince. The prince has already left, but I don't think he will give up. Moreover, he saw a witch and a beautiful girl imprisoned in a tower. What do you think will happen next? The potions master certainly thought of what would happen next. The prince would most likely want to find someone to eliminate her, the evil witch, and it just so happened that the church in this kingdom was very powerful. Did you do it on purpose? You lured the prince here. Thinking of this, the potions master could not help but look at Locke with suspicion. I can swear to the gods, I didn't lead the prince here. It wasn't my fault that he found Rapunzel. It was just because Rapunzel loved to sing and he was attracted by her singing, Locke said slowly, but it's not safe here now. The prince will definitely tell the church about you. Even if you kill the prince now, it will be of no use. The king will definitely send someone to check the situation. And you living here is not a secret to the nearby villagers, It seems that everything is as you wish. The potion master glanced at Locke and couldn't help but sneered. None of this is my plan. It's simply because the Holy Light Church's power is growing, and the space left for people like us is shrinking, Locke said slowly. 20 or 30 years ago, even if the king knew, they wouldn't be able to do anything. But now, the church has grown here, and they'll definitely seek its help. Even if you move to another location, as long as the church continues to expand, you'll encounter the same situation sooner or later. You're right. After a long moment of reflection, the potions master reluctantly admitted that Locke was right. If his previous statement that the church might return was just speculation, then now it was highly likely to become reality. She was only proficient in potion making, not combat, and couldn't possibly contend with the endless stream of members of the church's demon hunting teams. Besides, you can't keep Rapunzel locked up forever. She'll eventually have to see the outside world. Instead of letting her escape and be deceived, it's better to let her meet more people like her so she can get help when she needs it. Seeing that the potions master's attitude was beginning to soften, Locke hurriedly continued to persuade her. The potions master glanced at Locke. He knew Locke hoped she would accept the Black Queen's invitation, but deep down, she didn't want to accept. The Black Queen wasn't a pushover and was simply trying to exploit her. But the situation was unpredictable. The Black Queen was determined to exploit her abilities, but once the church arrived, she'd be dead. Even if she fled elsewhere, what good would that do? As Locke had said, with the spread of the Holy Light Church's faith, the survival space for descendants of the old gods like her was shrinking as the church's power grew. Continuing to flee would only mean a slow death. Thinking of this, the potions master finally made up his mind. I accept the Black Queen's invitation. However, there are many important items in the potion garden, including some precious potions that must mature. Therefore, I'll need to stay here for a while. If anyone from the church shows up, the Black Queen will help me deal with them. That's no problem, Locke said, patting his chest and agreeing to the potions master's offer. Through his previous encounters and the Queen's accounts, Locke had a good grasp of the current strength of the Vatican's forces. The combination of the diocesan bishop and holy knights Locke had encountered was a rare, high-end combination within the Vatican. In a head-on battle, even against a higher-ranking bishop, Locke wouldn't have to worry too much. The Black Witch Queen was wary of the Vatican primarily because most of its bishops possessed the ability to summon angels or even avatars of the Lord of Light. While these summoned angelic clones or incarnations were far less powerful than the original, they were still considered top-tier combatants in a fairy tale world, and even the Queen would have a difficult time dealing with them. However, executing a summoning operation, even by the Pope, was not easy. It required the support of a large number of fanatical followers or a treasured collection of holy relics. Therefore, Locke readily agreed to deal with any potential Vatican punitive forces. However, the potions master, believing Locke to be overly arrogant, questioned the power of a mere gigolo and asked him to contact the Black Witch Queen. Chapter 246 Preparing to Relocate. The potions master is a formidable figure. In the Harry Potter world, Locke only learned about a potion for enhancing mental strength from Dumbledore. Moonlight Enlightenment, a potion made from unicorn blood, is combined with 7 or 8 other ingredients, including ambergris and tranquilizers. Locke painstakingly mastered the recipe, ingesting large quantities of Moonlight Enlightenment and returning with a substantial supply of finished products. Crucially, he risked his life by capturing several unicorns, ensuring he would never run out of ingredients for his own potions. However, all potions have their own tolerance levels and side effects. For example, Moonlight Enlightenment can cause nighttime headaches for at least a month after taking it. The potions master knows of 7 or 8 potions that can enhance mental strength. One particularly effective potion is Ghost Powder, made from ghosts, along with Requiem, rice, and ghost water. It has a powerful effect on boosting mental strength. However, its drawback is that it can be corrupted by the resentful spirits of the ghosts, requiring the user to gradually eliminate these side effects. Accidentally taking too much can lead to resentment and mental confusion. There are also potions with minimal side effects, such as the Crimson Moon drink, which is made primarily from Crimson Moon grass, along with Negan's fluid, crooked snake venom, and Mandragora flower petals. While it has virtually no side effects, its mental boost is limited. The recipes for these potions were passed down from the time when the old gods still existed. Some of the ingredients are not found in the Harry Potter world, but only grown by the potions master. Therefore, a potions master was invited to serve as a teacher, and the plants from the potion garden also needed to be moved over. It wasn't just a matter of packing up a couple of bags and heading out. For this reason, Locke used Decaprit to run back and empty his small suitcase. As for why he didn't use Decaprit directly from the start, using special magic is inherently dangerous. Getting stuck in rocks or trees is common if you're not careful about your target location. Many wizards in the Harry Potter world have been injured by this method. Unless you're sure your target location is safe, it's best not to use Decaprit recklessly. By this time, nearly 3 months had passed since the taming of a multi-headed dragon. Under Fleur's command, the Antiest dwarves, following the Hogwarts blueprints Locke had obtained, had built a replica of the massive castle in a forest dozens of miles from the capital. With the Queen's help, they established a plantation, a forbidden forest, and other areas, giving the school its initial appearance. Locke had placed the magical plants and various beasts in his small suitcase in the plantation and the forbidden forest, which was enchanted to prevent their escape. He also spent considerable time using spells to modify the plantation's natural conditions to suit the growth of the various magical plants. For the next 2 weeks, Locke spent his daily meditations and reduced his sleep and rest time to a minimum. After much hard work, he had finally freed up most of the space in his suitcase. Meanwhile, our prince was also busy. He rushed back to the capital and immediately went to the church to contact the kingdom's cardinal. "Bishop, I've discovered a wicked old witch within the kingdom." The prince had prepared a story long beforehand, a blend of fact and fantasy, describing the potions master as a wicked old witch who delighted in torturing young girls. The potions master's village was remote, information was limited in this era, and the Vatican's faith had only grown rapidly in the past decade or two, so the Vatican was unaware of her presence. However, the prince's words revealed all of this to the Holy Light Church. The Vatican has always pursued a strategy of suppression and elimination for descendants of the old gods who possess extraordinary powers, even accumulating merit for eradicating heretics as much as for promoting the faith. The cardinal took the prince's words seriously, questioning him in detail about his experiences and arranging personnel to combat the heretics. "This magical tool of yours is truly amazing. It has such a large space, allowing me to transfer most of the magical plants in the potion garden. However, there are some extremely important magical plants in the potion garden that cannot be transplanted casually, let alone twice in such a short period of time." After Locke showed the potions master the interior of the small suitcase, she said, "These magical plants are extremely rare. Most of them are no longer found anywhere else except here. So we need to wait at least 2 months while I ripen them and obtain their seeds before we can leave." 2 months, Locke frowned. "If we have to wait that long, the Vatican will surely arrive." "Haha," the potions master sneered. "Even if I ripen these magical plants, replanting them will require a tremendous amount of effort. Did you act like you didn't care about the Vatican troops before? If so, you shouldn't have any problem dealing with the Vatican's punitive forces." The potions master's attitude towards Locke was indifferent. Although she knew that Locke hadn't deliberately lured the prince here, she had indeed been standing by and letting him know about the existence of the potion garden. Locke knew the potions master wasn't impressed, but as long as he could coax the potions master into teaching at the academy, everything else was secondary. A less than perfect attitude was fine. "Don't worry, you haven't contacted the Queen before. My abilities won't be a problem against the Vatican's punitive forces, unless they can summon angel clones. Only the Pope could summon clones of the Lord of Light. The most the kingdom's bishop could do was summon angel clones, and that required enormous expense and a long time to prepare. Locke doubted they would use their full power from the start. However, since he was defending his home, Locke had to make some preparations. He set up various traps around the potion garden and also set up a spell to counter the forbidden magic space. Everything in the world is inherently interconnected. The Vatican had methods to prohibit magic, and the Queen had also taught Locke countermeasures. It just required some preparation. The forbidden magic space didn't stop Locke from pulling out various RPGs, and even learning magic from Balthazar. As long as he had the materials, even without access to the surrounding magic, he could still create a variety of modern weapons with his own magic. But being able to make the opponent lose one of their means is always beneficial to oneself. Fighting itself is to maximize one's own advantages. There are too many examples of excessive pride and self-confidence leading to failure. And Locke does not want to be one of them. Chapter 247 Night Haunts. Locke set various spells and traps around the potion garden. The Vatican was also busy. Cardinal Lance summoned the knights and priests of the Vatican within the kingdom. He also had the prince persuade the king to dispatch 800 elite soldiers, forming a massive army to suppress the heresy and march towards the Potion Garden. As the army set out, the Vatican knights, sent by Cardinal Lance to scout the area, arrived ahead of him to investigate the Potion Garden. Cardinal Lance was quite cautious. Witches had many tricks up their sleeves, especially in their lairs, where they often deployed various traps and possibly even monsters. Therefore, he not only called in cannon fodder, the kingdom's soldiers, but also arranged for trusted individuals to come and scout ahead. Knight Hans, a close confidant of Cardinal Lance and the leader of the Vatican scouting team, was not far from the village near the Potion Garden. Knight Hans, I've been a member of the Vatican for almost 10 years, and I've never seen such a large-scale operation. Who are we dealing with this time? A nearby knight asked. It's a wicked old witch. Hans glanced at the map, confirming his direction. Holy light illuminates all, and heretics must be expelled, but is it just an ordinary old witch? Is it worth deploying so many men? We've dispatched 100 high-ranking knights, accompanied by paladins, and even Bishop Lance himself. Previous witch expulsions only required a paladin and a few dozen knights. I believe this force is enough to defeat the legendary Black Witch Queen. According to the handsome prince's description, this witch lives in a garden filled with exotic plants, so there must be many evil monsters there. Moreover, this operation is not only to eliminate the evil witch, but also to further spread the glory of the Lord to the people of this kingdom, so that more people can return to the Lord's embrace. As for the Black Witch Queen, the Vatican must now devote a great deal of energy to defeating the heretical Church of the Lord of Redemption. When all is said and done, even the Black Witch Queen will be reduced to ashes by the Lord's glory, but I heard the Black Witch Queen is very powerful and possesses a special magic mirror. It was responsible for our last expeditionary force's losses, another knight said. That was simply because the army was careless, Knight Hans said, frowning. The Black Witch Queen is indeed formidable. It took the angels of the kingdom of God to deal with her. The angels had already suppressed the Black Witch Queen, but she used the magic mirror to detect the army's weaknesses and launched a surprise attack, causing the expeditionary force to suffer. What is the origin of that magic mirror? It's so powerful, the person next to him couldn't help but ask. I've read Vatican texts. According to them, a high-ranking demon from hell one day crafted a terrifying artifact, the distortion mirror. All beautiful things, when viewed through the distortion mirror, vanish, while ugly things appear even uglier. The most beautiful scenery, reflected in this mirror, becomes like overcooked spinach. Handsome individuals become repulsive, even turned upside down, their faces distorted, and no longer recognizable as human. The demon's natural delight is in human suffering. This demon considered the mirror a masterpiece. He used it to commit countless crimes on Earth, bringing chaos to the human world. His repeated successes led him to become complacent, and he even considered distorting the Lord of Light. He brought the distortion mirror to the Lord's kingdom. Finally, the demon paid the price for his actions. The Lord of Light meted out divine punishment, slaying the demon and shattering the distortion mirror. After the shattering mirror, countless fragments scattered across the earth, yet these fragments still possessed magical powers, gradually forming various mysterious objects. The Queen's magic mirror was formed from a fragment of the mirror. Discovered and used by the Queen, it caused considerable trouble for the Church. After briefly explaining the origins of the magic mirror to his men, Knight Hans consulted the map. The evil witch's lair is just ahead, and there's a village nearby. Everyone, be careful not to alert the villagers. Who knows if any of them might have been seduced and corrupted by the witch. Knight Hans remained cautious. He didn't brazenly lead his men into the village to inquire about the situation, nor did he have anyone disguise themselves to inquire. A small village like this, where strangers hadn't been seen in years, would be highly likely to be noticed if a stranger suddenly appeared and questioned them. He opted to observe the area nearby, finally capturing a lone villager on the road outside the village as a telepath, and began questioning him. Coincidentally, the villager Knight Hans captured and questioned was none other than Rapunzel's biological father, the man who regularly delivered food to the Potion Garden. This time, he had also delivered food to the Potion Garden as per protocol, but before he could return to the village, he was apprehended by Knight Hans and his men. Sir Knight, I have confessed everything I know. I truly have nothing to do with that evil old witch. Faced with the Vatican Knight's interrogation, the middle-aged man dared not conceal a single detail. He explained everything from the beginning, from the time he stole the potion master's lettuce at his wife's insistence, to the time the potion master took their daughter away, to the time he regularly delivered food to the potion master. Don't worry, you two are a victim of that old witch. It must be the addictive properties of her lettuce that drove your wife to such a desperate craving. Nighthawks knew how to soothe an ignorant villager. The information he had now wasn't enough to satisfy him. The villager in front of him frequently delivered food to the old witch, so he must have more information about her. That old witch seduced your wife with evil lettuce, then forcibly abducted your daughter and forced you to prepare food for her daily. We've come here, guided by the Lord, to defeat this wicked witch and rescue your daughter. Now, I need you to recall more details and tell me about the old witch's lair, how many monsters it harbors, and whether she has any evil accomplices. Nighthawks tried to guide the villager, hoping he could come up with some details. Sure enough, the villager gave him a big surprise. The old witch's garden contains many plants I don't recognize. Because of the old witch's threats, I dare not touch them, fearing I might lose my life. But I do know one thing, a young man recently visited the old witch, claiming to be her friend. Tell me as much about him as possible. Nighthawks was shocked. This was extremely important news. The old witch's friend must be a heretic. Chapter 248 News and Expulsion. Nighthawks, is there anything wrong with the news that the peasant said? Seeing that Nighthawks came to the hillside to think after asking, his knights couldn't help but come over to ask. Not caring about the name his men called the middle-aged man, Nighthawks said thoughtfully, there's a big problem. If I guess correctly, the guy who came to visit the old witch is a powerful wizard. Wizard, yes, and the wizard who called himself Locke. Just over half a year ago, he disrupted the Vatican's plan to encircle the werewolf family, and even killed a diocesan bishop, a paladin and hundreds of Vatican knights. He is a vicious heretic. Oh my god, that was a bishop and a powerful paladin. How could he be killed by a wizard? The other knights couldn't help but exclaim after hearing Nighthawk's words. The details of the battle are unclear, but investigations conducted by personnel who subsequently responded to the scene have confirmed that the sorcerer possessed a special magical tool that could bypass the forbidden magic zone, unleashing immense destructive power. Nighthawks continued slowly. Furthermore, shortly thereafter, the sorcerer appeared in the Black Witch Queen's kingdom, becoming a noble. The Black Witch Queen even arranged for him to marry Snow White, leading us to speculate that the magical tool was given to him by the Black Witch Queen. After the incident, the Vatican informed bishops of Locke's situation and even provided a portrait of him. Based on the villager's description, I'm almost certain that the young man who visited the old witch a few months ago was Locke, Snow White. I heard her skin is as white as snow, and her beauty is unmatched, yet the Black Witch Queen forced her to marry an evil sorcerer, a knight exclaimed indignantly. The Black Witch Queen secretly murdered Snow White's father and gained control of her, so Snow White would surely be unwilling to marry this wicked wizard, another knight continued. Somehow, the mention of Snow White, whose beauty was renowned across the land, caused the knights to become increasingly talkative. Each one of them was filled with righteous indignation, eager to slay Locke and rescue Snow White from her suffering. This evil sorcerer is currently within the old witch's lair. This time, we must defeat him together, Nighthawks said, pleased with the morale of his troops. However, that evil sorcerer's power cannot be underestimated, and he also possesses the Black Witch Queen's magical tools. We should inform Bishop Lance of this news and let him decide how to eliminate this wicked heretic. So, how do you plan to defeat this wicked heretic? At this moment, an abrupt voice echoed, prompting Nighthawks to draw his sword and point it at the source. Then, he saw a familiar face, or rather, a face from a portrait he knew very well, standing nearby. Locke, Nighthawks blurted out, revealing the other party's identity. His men drew their weapons and stared at Locke nervously. Right beside him stood the middle-aged man they had just captured and questioned. Nighthawks couldn't help but glance over and saw that where the middle-aged man had been, two of his knights had fallen, their blood spilling all over the ground. Knowing that the beautiful prince's departure might attract the Vatican's punitive forces, Locke couldn't help but monitor his surroundings with his magic. So, even when Hans and his group approached the village, he had noticed them and secretly followed them. Through their conversations, he learned a lot about the Vatican's punitive forces and, incidentally, the origins of the Queen's magic mirror. He had hoped to learn more secrets, but now that they knew of his presence, Locke wouldn't allow them to pass on any information. You damned bastard! While shouting, Nighthawks suddenly produced something from his waist. Same old trick. Locke instantly recognized the tool used to activate the forbidden magic space. Without hesitation, he unleashed a spell the moment Nighthaunt's took it out. Bang! With a resounding explosion, the tool in Nighthaunt's hand suddenly exploded. Immediately, Locke extended his hand again, chanting an incantation. Call the divine fire. In the next moment, a blazing flame erupted around Nighthaunt's. The knights around him, without even a scream, were reduced to nothingness by the divine fire, leaving not even a trace of ashes. Nighthaunt's, the remaining knights cried out in horror. Their leader, the most skilled warrior, was slain in the blink of an eye by the wizard's flames. Their fury were combined with an unstoppable fear. Seeing the knights' angry, fearful eyes, Locke remained unmoved. He manipulated the divine fire into birds, which, following his thoughts, swiftly pounced upon the knights. Look out, oh my god, that's too fast. Seeing the flaming birds, formed from the divine fire, rushing towards them, the knights of the Holy See cried out in shock, their courage gone as they united in their common hatred against Locke. The flaming birds streaked through the air with such speed that the knights had no time to dodge before being swooped down. In the blink of an eye, each one was transformed into a torch, ignited and completely incinerated. Only after all the knights were completely destroyed did Locke turn to the middle-aged man beside him. He was sweating profusely and trembling all over. He looked at the knight's former position, speechless. He glanced at the middle-aged man. He had just revealed all the information about the potion garden to the knights. Locke wanted to kill him, but considering he was Rapunzel's biological father, he was reluctant to do so. After a moment's thought, Locke tossed a small bag of gold coins onto the ground and said, "Take this money and leave the village with your wife today. If I see you and your wife still here tomorrow, you'll be burned to ashes like those Vatican knights. Leaving now might be a good thing for them. If an ordinary couple got involved, they'd probably end up in trouble." Of course, if they didn't know better, Locke wouldn't mind carrying out his warning. With that, Locke, ignoring their reactions, quickly shifted gears and returned to the potions garden. The Vatican's advance scouts had arrived, and he needed to inform the potions master. Chapter 249 Arrival. When will those Vatican troops arrive? The potions master asked after Locke recounted what had just happened. This time, the Vatican's expedition is led by the kingdom's bishop, Bishop Lance. They have over 100 knights and 800 kingdom soldiers. Because of the large number of people, they won't move very fast, but they should be here in a week at most. Locke recounted the information he had just gathered. HMPH, over 100 knights, 800 soldiers, and a cardinal leading the team. These people from the Vatican really think highly of an old woman like me. The potions master's face turned grim. The number of people the Vatican had dispatched this time was far beyond her expectations. She looked at Locke. "Are you sure you can handle so many people?" "In my opinion, that Cardinal of Lance brought so many people this time mainly to further strengthen his relationship with the royal family and to promote the power of the Vatican. He doesn't really take us seriously. They are so arrogant. I will teach them a lesson. As long as the Cardinal doesn't violate the rules and summon an angel clone, there will be no problem." Summoning an angel clone is not that easy. Even for a Cardinal, he can't do it without extensive preparation. According to the information I've gathered, that Cardinal of Lance made no such preparations at all. In that case, leave the expeditionary forces to me. I'm just an alchemist, old woman, and I don't have much combat ability. The potions master glanced at the extremely confident Locke and said so. She had always believed that half of the current troubles were Locke's fault, so she had no intention of offering any assistance at this point. Since Locke was so confident, she let him handle it. Unnoticed, a week had passed, and Bishop Lance arrived at the village with a large group of troops. He sat in a chair in the village chief's living room, flanked by the handsome prince and a knight from the kingdom. Bishop Lance's expression was solemn. Knight Hans, who was supposed to report daily, had lost contact for the week. He had subsequently sent another group of knights, but they soon lost contact as well. This convinced him that the witch had undoubtedly learned of the expedition. Furthermore, the witch had annihilated 2 squads of knights, casting a shadow over the operation. Either the witch had escaped, or she had set numerous traps in her lair, waiting for them to enter. Thinking of this, Bishop Lance glanced at the handsome prince beside him. Aside from his appearance, the prince was completely unremarkable, but due to his immense favor, the king had agreed to allow him to join the expedition at his insistence. Bishop Lance knew what the other party was thinking. He was fascinated by the girl who seemed to be a witch. After all, there was no ordinary girl who could let her hair hang so long. The heretics must be eliminated, but he was still needed to better command the army sent by the king. So Bishop Lance did not mention the girl at all. Instead, he asked, "Have you learned anything from the villagers?" "We have inquired, but we know very little. The witch rarely interacts with the villagers, and no one dares to approach the forest where the witch lives. They only dare to cut wood and hunt on the outskirts. Only the White family seems to be in collusion with the witch. For more than 10 years, they have regularly delivered food to the witch," a knight of the Holy See replied. HMPH. These traitors colluding with heretics, Bishop Lance thought to himself, and continued, "Where are the White family now? The villagers say they suddenly disappeared one night a week ago. They found their home empty at dawn and waited for days, but there was no sign of them returning, a week ago, HMPH. It seems they won't be coming back." Bishop Lance thought of Knight Hans's group, which had also disappeared a week ago. He suspected their whereabouts had been exposed, and the White family had reported the news to the witch. With this in mind, Bishop Lance said, "Send a notice to the people, issue a wanted notice for this couple. I want them to know the consequences of betraying the Lord of Light and associating with heretics." "Yes, Your Highness." After the knight left, Bishop Lance looked at the handsome prince. "Your Highness, you've been to that witch's lair before, so you should remember the way there." "Of course. I remember every tree and blade of grass along the way." "Let's set out now and capture that evil witch," the prince said anxiously. "Your Highness, we've been traveling for days, and it's already afternoon. If we set out now, it will be nighttime when we arrive, making it impossible to fight. It would be better to let the soldiers rest for the night and set out tomorrow." The leading knight of the kingdom's army disagreed. "No, the witch is right here. What if she escapes now? These are the kingdom's elite troops. Can't they endure such a small hardship? Let them set out immediately." The prince, upon hearing this, immediately grew anxious and loudly retorted, "It's certainly not the right time to march." Bishop Lance admittedly lacked military expertise, but he understood that night wasn't the right time for fighting. He addressed the prince, "But we also need to investigate the witch's movements first, lest she flee upon seeing our army. So, I think we should send some soldiers to scout ahead and confirm any traps the witch has set along the way." The knights of the kingdom quickly responded, "Bishop Lance is right. I'll send some soldiers to scout ahead. Let's rest the main force tonight, and it would be best to set out early tomorrow morning." Seeing that Bishop Lance and the knights agreed, the handsome prince couldn't help but feel a little anxious. He could barely wait to see the beautiful girl with his soul-stirring voice again. Bishop Lance offered some soothing words, finally getting the handsome prince to reluctantly agree to march tomorrow. However, the prince couldn't resist taking his soldiers with him to scout ahead. "I'm the only one who knows the way there, and it's perfect for me to lead the scouting," the handsome prince declared. "No, that's too dangerous. There must be a witch trap in the jungle." Bishop Lance quickly intervened, feeling that the prince was a nuisance. If you were to encounter any danger, the Vatican would have trouble explaining it to the royal family. Together with the kingdom's knights, he resolutely stopped the prince from taking such a risk. Faced with these two men's refusal, the handsome prince could only wait until the next morning before joining the group, heading into the jungle. "According to our soldiers' earlier reconnaissance, we encountered no traps along the way. However, 2 soldiers were killed by sorcery when approaching the illusionary barrier the handsome prince mentioned." After setting off, Bishop Lance rode in the center of the group, pondering the soldiers' reports. "It seems the witch hasn't left yet. Is she so arrogant? Isn't she worried about the army's attack? What traps has she prepared?" Boom! At that moment, a loud noise erupted from the front of the group, sending the leading troops into chaos. Chapter 250 Confrontation. What happened? Bishop Lance, upon seeing this, hurriedly led his men to the front of the column, only to be met with a horrific scene. A large pit had formed in front of the column, surrounded by a pool of blood and the bodies of several soldiers, their flesh and blood mangled to the point of being unrecognizable. Meanwhile, a few soldiers, further away, wailed, clutching their wounds. The soldiers ahead were walking along the road when the ground suddenly exploded. A priest hurried forward to report. "But I've already explored this area, and I don't see any signs of witchcraft." Frowning, Bishop Lance produced a compass and chanted a spell. A moment later, he put the compass away. He indeed found no signs of a witchcraft trap, but the scene before him couldn't be faked. Bishop Lance felt the priest had been careless, but it was inappropriate to reprimand him directly at this moment. as this would undermine the church's prestige. So, he shouted, "This is a trap set by that evil witch. I've already checked it out. The next section is clear. Keep going." Meanwhile, Locke, in the potion garden, heard the faint sound of explosions in the forest and whispered, "Since our friends have arrived, we must give them a warm welcome. I laid these mines last night as a greeting, and they should be able to sense my hospitality." Boom boom. Not long into the march, the team triggered 2 more mines. Bishop Lance was mortified. He had just claimed there were no traps, but reality had proven otherwise. He could even see the fear and suspicion in the soldiers' eyes. What kind of trap is this? There's no magical activity. Bishop Lance checked again with divine magic, but found nothing. But Bishop Lance knew there were more traps ahead. The surrounding kingdom soldiers were afraid to advance, fearing they would end up like their comrades. The entire column halted its advance. Bishop Lance knew it couldn't drag on, but he hadn't considered sending the Vatican Knights ahead. He was hesitant about forcing the kingdom soldiers to continue when the handsome prince appeared, loudly urging them on. Bishop Lance breathed a sigh of relief. Having someone die in front was the best option. At a time like this, the prince was quite useful. The kingdom soldiers advanced cautiously for the next few hundred meters, but eventually, they triggered one mine after another. By the time all 20 mines Locke had been set off, the kingdom soldiers had suffered over 100 casualties. Finally, they reached the magical barrier surrounding the potion garden. The kingdom soldiers refused to advance, no matter what. Bishop Lance, upon detecting traces of the barrier, breathed a sigh of relief. The Vatican had plenty of methods to counter these sorcerous enchantments. To boost morale and highlight the Vatican's power, Bishop Lance approached the barrier. Dozens of priests and knights stood behind him, chanting spells. A golden light emanated from his body, illuminating him with a sacred and sublime presence. This sight dispelled the anxieties of the surrounding kingdom soldiers, and many even joined in prayer. The golden light struck the barrier, causing it to falter upon contact. The barrier held out for mere seconds before shattering, revealing the scene within the potion garden. This cardinal is truly quite capable. His magical power even surpasses mine, Locke thought to himself. Unfazed by the shattered barrier, he simply snapped his fingers. Swish, swish, swish. "Let me give you a taste of the RPG of the technological age." Locke was determined to fight the asymmetric battle to the bitter end. With so many people on the other side, rolling up his sleeves and attacking them would be a travesty. Countless rockets, trailing long flames, were aimed at Cardinal Lance and the army behind him. Holy light arrows. Cardinal Lance reacted swiftly, instantly condensing over a dozen golden arrows and detonating the dozen or so rockets in the lead. Boom, boom, boom. A violent explosion erupted, sending up a cloud of dust. Bishop Lance's expression changed, and he quickly cast a shield in front of him. The next moment, several rockets struck the shield, causing it to crumble. Dozens more rockets streaked onto the troops behind, exploding amidst the crowd. Lord, devil, help! The army behind Bishop Lance was in ruins. Soldiers at the front and even in the center suffered heavy casualties. Countless others who survived the initial casualties let out continuous screams and wails, throwing the entire army into chaos. Seeing this, the kingdom soldiers behind him, some fearful ones, immediately dropped their weapons and turned to flee. With one person leading the charge, the others quickly followed suit. Hundreds of them scattered like birds and beasts, screaming in terror as they raced to escape the forest. The knights commanding the troops were bewildered, and many even fled. The witch's sorcery was terrifying. It was an attack from hell, and ordinary people like them had no way to resist. They should leave it to the powerful bishop. Locke glanced over and saw the handsome prince in magnificent armor lying on the ground in front of the group. He was now covered in dust, one leg missing, and he lay wailing. It seemed that even if he survived, he would be called the one-legged handsome prince from now on. Damn heretic! Bishop Lance, who had witnessed all this, ignored the fear. Seeing Locke's appearance, he immediately became furious. "Everyone, follow me." More than 20 priests and knights had been behind Bishop Lance. He had previously shielded them from the rocket fire, and they were more well-trained. Following the bishop's command, they didn't care about their companions. They took out a piece of parchment and began to chant softly. "My lord, you are the author of order. All who disobey you will be imprisoned," they chanted with incredible speed, their energy gathering. Locke could feel the surrounding light element boiling like boiling water, transforming into luminous chains as thick as calves. Faint runes emerged from these chains, entwining themselves around Locke's position. With a swift movement, the chains reached him in the blink of an eye, shattering in an instant. Even the armor spells he had set up couldn't stop them. Locke didn't bother launching a second wave of attacks, teleporting dozens of meters away. Bang! The chains missed, crashing into the ground where Locke had stood, creating a deep crater. Meanwhile, Locke, having just teleported, wasted no time and activated the magical mechanism he had prepared. Hundreds of rockets erupted. Seeing the rockets coming, Cardinal Lance sneered. As he manipulated them, more than a dozen chains in front of him danced like whips. Boom, boom, boom. Over a dozen chains struck the rockets one by one, detonating them without harming Cardinal Lance or those around him. You've adapted quickly. You've found the flaws in the rockets so quickly, and your spells are incredibly fast. As expected of a cardinal, you're much stronger than that fake cardinal before. You're going to be tough to deal with, Locke thought to himself, not intending to hold back, and immediately unleashed all the weapons he had prepared. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone, see you in the next video.